Thank you.
Hey, the lights are on. Everything's working.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We will. Someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those against? Great. Approved. We will start with proclamations and presentations, and we will have a presentation from Coastside Venture Studio Update.
Great, thank you very much. And good evening, Mayor Brownstone, Council and Community. Karen Decker, Economic and Community Vitality Manager. It's my pleasure to introduce your next presenter, Eric Vettel. He's the founder and president of American Energy Society. American Energy Society is operating Coastside Venture Studio, which is an incubator to accelerator program located at the Opportunity Center of the Coastside. The idea to launch a business incubator came out of the Coastside Recovery Initiative. There were 4 working teams focused on different areas, and the team that really prioritized and talked about innovation had really great conversations on the coast. That group was really had lofty goals about how to spur regional innovation, how to build entrepreneurship capacity, and how to support business and job growth. And incubators may not be unique, and you've heard me say before, many of them fail, but what makes Coastside Venture Studio different is that it really tries to harness our local industries and our assets. So the fact that we have an airport, the fact that we have agriculture and fisheries and a beautiful Pacific Ocean and a harbor, these things make the coast unique. So a goal is, for the last year, has been trying to attract startups that have alignment, have value alignment. And really, it's very important when we're vetting these nonprofits that are invited to join Coastside Venture Studio, that they value people and planet and profit, which we refer to as kind of this triple P bottom line. So with that said, we have some exciting updates to share, and I'd like to warmly invite Eric to the podium.
Thanks, Karen. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Raise this up a little bit here. I'd like to thank the City Council for the chance to provide an update on the Coastside Venture Studio. The thesis of my update is pretty simple. This Venture Studio is a rare example of something going according to plan in the first year. I will begin with a quick story. On Wednesday, April 19th, we hosted a demo day for one of our startups, Phlox Robotics, an AI-enabled drone technology that helps humans and wildlife coexist. Basically, it works like this. When their drone or a stationary device detects a threat, a wildlife threat, it will find in its library the right sound to herd it away. The old way of doing this was typically with guns, poison, or traps. The Phlox method is more humane. We knew what's that? Okay, keeps dropping, sorry. We knew that the Phlox technology worked because we've been working with them for about 1 year, but I always worry. That's my nature. This demonstration had 4 customers in attendance, along with local influencers like the vice mayor, the city manager, and the economic and community vitality manager, along with 30 other people. So I pulled into the Johnston House parking lot 30 minutes early, and I hopped out of my car. And right above my head, I heard a blood-curdling screech that sounded like a hawk, and I was its breakfast. I couldn't get into my car fast enough. And as I was locking my doors for protection, I saw the Phlox Robotics engineers laughing at me. I knew right then that this demonstration was going to go well. It went better than that. After the successful demonstration, the audience gathered at the Johnston House for Q&A. one of the customers, a facilities manager for SFO, who was clearly interested in the Phlox product, said, "How do we know if we buy it, you won't disappear and the customer or product service is gone?" Without missing a beat, the Phlox CEO, Sarah Noskova, said, "We are already here. Half Moon Bay is our home. We aren't going anywhere, and if we raise the Series A $5 million round, we will start hiring right away." I looked at the vice mayor, I looked at Matthew, and I looked at Karen and our advisors in the audience, and we nodded. Yes, this was exactly their vision. Because your vision was so clearly stated at the beginning, all we have to do is execute. This venture studio is working according to your plan in the first year. Diversify the economy, create new jobs, have economic impact in the first year. Now we get ready for cohort 2. And of course, there's more to do with cohort 1, always. But now we get ready for cohort 2. We remain committed to our 4 verticals: ag tech, water tech, the built environment, and of course, the local startup ecosystem too. Our selection process is to reverse engineer specific challenges faced by the co-side. For instance, in addition to providing opportunities for local entrepreneurs, here are a few examples of startups we are recruiting right now. In ag tech, we're recruiting a startup that makes a natural fertilizer biostimulant. In the built environment, we're recruiting a startup that makes a natural material that can protect the coastline. In water tech, we may have found a startup that has an enzyme that can break down plastic materials for reuse. To help reduce power outages, we have found quite a few startups that offer microgrid and utility scale solutions. We're evaluating a number of startups who think they can turn eucalyptus biowaste into useful materials. The co-benefits of this venture are incredible: new jobs, cleaner energy, wildfire mitigation, to name just a few. We're even recruiting a company that can turn mycelium, mushroom stems, into building materials. We also have a few stealth companies in the background too. Needless to say, we're going to have a very busy April. Today we hosted 2 startups looking to expand their operation on the West Coast, and they think Half Moon Bay is ideal. Of course, we need to continue coaching our current startups every day, but now we need to recruit the next cohort and coach them up too. Also on April 23rd at lunch, we're hosting a private summit to evaluate biomass conversion technologies, literally companies that can use our eucalyptus waste and turn it into a commercial product. Right after that, we're hosting a boot camp for Swedish startups. And throughout it all, our goal remains your vision: foster market-ready startups that will have positive economic impact as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Sounds great.
It's a clear vision.
Thank you for everything you've been doing. Any questions from council?
I'm excited. We got the Swedes coming over here and building stuff, and I'm really excited. When I heard that, I called Matthew about that. I was like, this is really cool. Very cool.
I think you should attend the boot camp if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I missed the drone thing. I didn't know what that was all about. Then I'm looking on Facebook. I'm like, oh man, I missed that one. But I'll get the next one.
We'll get you at the
I'm
next
excited about this, and I'm excited about us actually as a city going out and venturing in to see what we can do. And this is based on the report that I read that I got off Matthew's desk, and I was like, this is really good stuff. And so this is now the outcome, so I'm pretty excited.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, I attended the event at the depot for the company Flock, and it was really exciting. I mean, it's totally tuned in to the values of our community, using conservation techniques to provide value-added benefits, like for airports and many other uses. And I found it fascinating, was really excited by it, and I like what we're doing.
Well, thank you. Having you in attendance was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So thank you.
Not just add one thing. When we started up this plan, and we've been talking about it, to build startups here and to help our local economy, help reduce our deficit, and it's kind of like I wouldn't say naysayers, but a lot of folks were saying, oh yeah, okay, but that's going to take years to become a reality. So here we are, the reality is here now. So I hope there'll be more people who are paying attention, so it's great. Thank you.
I hope so too. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Report out from recent closed sessions.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Community. There have not been any recent closed session meetings, so nothing to report out.
Thank you. City managers updates. First, on Republic Services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we have two updates tonight. The first is from Republic Services, who of course provides our waste management services on behalf of the city. So I see a few of them in the audience, and it looks like Helen will do an intro first. Perfect.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, community members, and staff. I'm Helen Walter, Sustainability Manager for the City of Half Moon Bay. Tonight we have Republic Services update for you. It's short and brief and sweet. We have Catherine, I hope I don't mutilate names here, Catherine Tacolby and Monica Da Vinci, to give you the updates.
Thanks for having us. I'm Catherine, and this is Monica De Vincenzi. She'll be giving our update, but I'm the General Manager for Republic Services Half Moon Bay.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Helen. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, staff, and the community. Thank you for giving us a few minutes to update you on what we've been up to and what's happening in our world. Next slide, please. The first one is, this is Earth Month for the city and the rest of the country and state, but our annual Earth Day event, Recycling Day, is coming up on April 26th. It'll be at Smithfield from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., and they'll be shredding e-waste and free compost giveaway, so we encourage the whole community to take advantage of this one, and we always do another one in the fall. So, but this is the first one for this year. Next slide. So all things organics. Senate Bill 1383, you've heard us and staff talk about this for a number of years now. This went into effect in 2022, and it's the short-lived climate pollutants bill for the state, which mandatorily requires all residents, businesses, and community members to have organics collection services. It's been in effect since 2022, and from 2022 until the beginning of this year, really we were focused on education, outreach, trying to get people to voluntarily sign up for the organic service. In Half Moon Bay, for residents, the service is included with their garbage collection services. For businesses and multifamily, they do get a small cart for their organics included with their garbage rates. But the bill also requires enforcement, and so this year the city is pivoting to enforcement with our assistance, and so you may have gotten the letter that came out earlier at the beginning of this year reminding folks that this bill is on the table. Everybody needs to be in compliance, and if they don't, they could face penalties. And so we've been working with staff to get, by and large, as many people in compliance without the enforcement portion of it. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about some good news. Commercial, of course, is the challenging one, more than residents. And as you can see from 2022, where we were collecting about 400 tons of organics from businesses in Half Moon Bay, we jumped that to 452 in 2023. And then in 2024, that went up to 510 tons for the year. So it's definitely moving in the right direction. We're going to be focusing on it some more. The other thing that we'll be doing related to SB 1383, it's also required, is that we do route audits where we go out and we flip lids and give kudos to those who are doing everything right, and then also recognize those that maybe need some additional education and aren't quite properly sorting their material correctly, whether that's recycling and organics not in the right place or finding recycling and organics in their trash when it should be in the blue and the green. And so the photo in there is from community outreach that we did to businesses in conjunction with the city earlier this year. Next slide. And then just, you may have received a letter on this as well, as annually we do a rate adjustment. This year's was 2.8%, and it went into effect today. I think that's it for that. And then our contact information. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
So, when we do the composting and all that stuff, can we get cans? Like, I noticed you have the green can, the blue can, and I know that in our kitchen area prep room, we have it all laid out. Can we get those from you guys to do it at home? Yes? Okay.
So those Slim Jims?
Yeah.
No, those are for commercial businesses.
Right.
What we do provide for residents is the carts that come in the 3 different colors. So the blue, black, and the green wheeled carts that you put out on your curb. We do have kitchen pails that we provide to residents. We did it at the rollout, and then if somebody starts the program, there's breaks or whatever, we're happy to replace those. But those Slim Jims that you see here are designed
That's more for commercial.
Commercial,
Right.
correct.
So on the composting though, like the under the sink composting, that's kind of what I'm after, like for the home use. Is that something you guys provide?
We do a 3-gallon kitchen pail that you
Right.
can set it on your counter. But what I've done in my house is I've just turned my home, what used to be my garbage can, into my compost can. So that's what I use. But we don't have those for residential uses.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned enforcement, but you also said we want to be proactive and not have to, whatever. I don't know what the enforcement is. I know there were a lot of questions when the letter did come out from the city. Is there a proactive, how you will instruct us, or is there a way, how did somebody know? Because I still find myself, I go, I got something on this. Does it go in this color or this color?
Sure.
You know?
So the enforcement part of it, more than anything, is to get residents and businesses to participate in the program.
You got our attention.
So that's the first part. Once we have that, then we are going to be doing these. We've done it more on the commercial side where we'll flip the lid, look at it, or the organics facility will tell us, hey, there's material in there that doesn't belong, and we'll educate you. We won't penalize you right away. Now, what we will do is if we keep seeing the same thing with the same household having that issue, then that becomes a thing that we work through with the city and say, okay, here's where we've tried, we've tagged it, we've left it, we've called them, we've met with them, and they're still not sorting properly. And it's not just because on the collection side, but when this material goes downstream to the organics processing, they're under thresholds from the state as well, where they have to audit their material, and it has to meet the thresholds that the state has set for how much contaminants, non-compostable material show up in there. So we're not gonna come out with a stick right away. We're still gonna try the carrot approach and the education approach. But if there is a repeat offender, like, first 2 or 3 times we'll let it go, and then after that we'll work with the city on that part. So you'll know before we hit you with it.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Can I just add something? I will fully agree with you that it's confusing what bin things go in. That messy yogurt bin, can that go in messy, right? Or do you need to wash it? I've started now putting it in my dishwasher. I have a dishwasher, I'm really lucky that way. But if in doubt, Monica gave this to me. If in doubt, throw it out, right? Like, we want to keep the compost stream as clean as possible. So, but we know it's confusing. So I also wanted to just reiterate, I know I did this before, but the or the household waste day with the county is June 28th, and the fall recycling day is scheduled for September 27th, that Monica mentioned. So while I had you, I wanted to let you guys know, for those of you who like to hold dates. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can also put that on our weekly and biweekly notifications so as we get closer to those dates.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
go out.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
All right, we have one more update, and Irma Acosta is going to give that to us.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, community. Irma Acosta, Economic and Community Vitality Division, and I am here to provide an update on Nonprofit Day that is happening this Saturday, April 5th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., and it'll actually be held in this building. So I just wanted to share, we have approximately 30 nonprofits that have signed up to participate in this event. So we really just wanted to urge the community to come and learn about what these organizations do and how they contribute to our community, as well as learn as their mission and any volunteer and job opportunities that they might have. So again, Saturday, April 5th, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Teddarka Community Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council?
I think it's a great way to introduce people to the nonprofits before the May 1st, giving day, coast-side giving. Learn about how your money is used and the benefit to the people who are served and the community for knowing that people are getting served. So it's good.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We're now going to open public forum. A couple of things. If you're here in the room and like to speak at public forum, please fill out a form. Leave it at the end of our dais here. In public forum, you can address any issue that you like that's not on the agenda. So if there's an item on the agenda, an agendized item, please wait till we reach that item on the agenda, because for each item we will have time for public comment on each itemized agenda. But this is for anything else that might be on your mind. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. There'll be a timer up here. You'll hear a beep at 2.5 minutes, warning you that you have 30 seconds, and then you'll have a final beep. Okay. So we'll start with Joaquin Jimenez.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, city staff, members of the public. My name is Joaquin Jimenez, and today I want to talk about housing. In less than 24 hours, members of our community, we collected close to 500 signatures. Jacinto, Maria, Rocio, and other members of our community, mobilized to collect the signatures. And it says, this is what it says on top of the paper. Estoy de acuerdo en el plan de desarrollo de la ciudad de Half Moon Bay con todas las propiedades incluidas para construir viviendas, meaning I am in support of Half Moon Bay housing element to build housing in all the locations that were mentioned in the housing element. So, the last meeting, we have talked about, you approved the housing element that included the church property. in every property, that we have, seen and visited, and members of our community. I mentioned to you, the last meeting, that we have, a lot of need of housing. Right? We support the people that need the housing, support the housing element as it sits, as it is. There's no question about it. Signatures are easy to collect. In less than 24 hours, there's proof right here. Pages of signatures. Now, how much do you actually care about the housing need of our community? Are we willing to develop housing for the need of our community? And I'm talking about everybody across the board. We saw that we need very low-income housing, moderate housing, a total of 480 units that have to be built. We have the locations. I don't know. It's maybe I'm pushing too hard, but I don't think the Catholic Academy, has enough funds to build the school. It's questionable. Maybe they have the students. Who knows? But yes, just to show you the signatures, we have them, and the community supports the housing element that you approved the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. I think we have someone online as well.
Shauna, go ahead.
I apologize. I was out of the room. Is this about the 555 Kelly, or should I raise my hand later?
You should raise your hand later. We will be with that item next.
Thank you. So we have a lot of cards for the agendized item on 555 Kelly and the ENA. So again, when we come up to that agenda item and have our presentations, we will have time for public comment. So just want to let you know, thank you, we have all your cards. Our next person is Rosia Hola. Is Rocio here? Rocio? Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm sorry. That's 3A also. Okay, never mind.
We have no
That's
more
it.
online. Yeah.
That's it. Okay. Public forum is now closed. Thank you.
I move that we approve the consent calendar, item 1A, waive reading of resolutions and ordinances.
Second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion carried. Okay. Our next item is under resolutions and staff reports. And the first item is 3A, 555 Kelly Avenue Affordable Housing Development, amendment of exclusive negotiations agreement between the city and Mercy Housing.
Okay, if it's okay through the mayor, I can go ahead and get started.
Yep, I'm going to start with staff report.
Okay, so good evening, Mayor Brownstone and City Council. Mike Noche, I'm the Housing Programs Manager for the city. This evening, we do not have a formal presentation for you. We are just providing a verbal introduction to this item. It's directly related to a new exclusive negotiations agreement that was approved in January of 2025 of this year. The current ENA, I'll refer to the exclusive negotiations agreement as the ENA. The current ENA, with a term of 1 year, fills a gap that relates to an affordable housing and property disposition agreement, also referred to as the AHPDA, and terms of a ground lease that are currently being negotiated in good faith by both parties, which are Mercy Housing and the city, for the property at 555 Kelly. The approval of the ENA and amendment does not obligate either party to execute an AHPDA in terms of a ground lease, but it does demonstrate Mercy's engaged with the city for their funding needs and applications that are moving forward, and I'll provide some background there. Layered financing is very common in regards to affordable housing developers who seek funds from local jurisdictions, county, state sources as well. So this is pretty much, as far as funding sources, is fairly standard for affordable housing financing and operations. The proposed term of the amendment that was in the staff report puts Mercy in the best position for their application. The upcoming application that they'll be applying to is the Joe Cerna Jr. Farm Worker Housing Grant Program. The additional language being requested as part of the amendment is a proposed ground lease of 65 years with an option to extend and a proposed lease payment of $1. Again, these are ongoing negotiation points, but they are needed starting points for the applicant, or not for the applicant, but for the developer in regards to entering into their funding requirements with the state. The ENA term does not change. It would remain 1 year. And this evening, we do have Mercy staff here this evening to assist city staff with answering any questions that may arise, and wanted to be very straightforward in regards to not providing a lengthy presentation on this one, given we were just here in January, and acknowledging that. But city staff as well as Mercy Housing are here for questions. And that'll be it. I'll return time to the dais. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Do we have any clarifying questions from council based on that, or? Okay.
I do. Thank you. I have some questions, and maybe, I don't know, maybe city staff or Mercy are going to answer. Again, I'm new on the council. I've indicated to previous meeting, there's a planning director, an assistant city manager, one council member that was more involved than another councilor, but, two new council members that are on now. So I'm trying to catch up. Years of planning have been going on. So that's why some of my questions may relate to that. And just quickly, because I had more than one person ask this question, in the agenda report, it mentioned about a 65-year lease tonight, but then a 99-year. It's not a 164-year lease, correct? It would be extending it to 99 years.
That's correct. Okay. Extending to, it's the possibility of extension to 99 years.
Right.
Correct.
And tonight is just asking for the city to go ahead and do a 65-year lease at $1 per year. So also I tried to review a lot of these agreements in staff reports. There's a lot of information over the years. There really is. So, and as part of my catch-up, I noticed that on October 4th, 2022, June 20th, 2023, then in 2025, January, we just did the ENA, and now tonight, and maybe some of them are misprints, but I noticed a disposition and development lease agreement, which my understanding, that's what was part of the original ENA. Then there's the affordable housing and property disposition agreement, which we're talking about now. Then there's also a ground lease. And then it was in the agenda report, maybe it was a mistyped, but it said a disposition and development loan agreement. Is there a DDLA that's a loan agreement? Or is it just a lease agreement? It was just a misprint.
Yeah, so I think the best way to answer that question is the use of the terminology DDLA, the disposition development and loan agreement, was really just a standard carryover from early on in the development process, not knowing exactly the pathway that would be pursued in regards to affordable housing covenants, ground lease. That was introduced, frankly, through, I believe, kind of jointly through the city and our then, at the time, we had a consultant who recommended that as just a carryover language to use at the time. It's not that DDLAs don't exist, it's just that this specific project was using that as holding language, and when the time came to be more specific about what those agreements would be, the affordable housing property disposition agreement was used and recommended as a pretty much discovered as best practice, and what Mercy was using with the county on a development that predated this process that the city was undergoing.
So is it a loan agreement or a lease agreement? The DDLA.
Could you repeat that?
Is the DDLA a disposition and development lease agreement?
Loan agreement
So
is
it's
what
a
the
loan
L
agreement.
would stand for.
Oh.
So it would encompass large
okay.
portions of some jurisdictions do use them. Because we weren't attaching the funding under that umbrella, we looked at best practices, and we decided to follow what the county was using with Mercy Housing.
I do want to correct, the term development, disposition and development lease agreement was used at one point as the description of DDLA in previous documents. So even that term, DDLA, can be used in both of those cases, loan agreement or lease agreement.
But to me, they're two different agreements.
They are. They achieve different purposes. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Okay. And then since the current agreement in ENA is the AHPDA
The ENA is the exclusive negotiations agreement.
that we're trying to approve an AHPDA?
Correct.
So will the city manager, will the city manager negotiate for the AHPDA?
So that's part of a current ad hoc committee that's negotiating and working on terms with Mercy Housing. All of this would come back to city council. All terms would return to city council, and I'll,
Right, because
unless there's anything
section
else to elaborate on.
3.16 of the ENA mentions the city manager will be approving, but the AHPDA will have to come back to the city council for approval.
Correct.
And then, can I just ask, how come this request, the amendment was not in the January? We just did one in January. Why wasn't this in the January?
If it's okay with the council, I'd welcome Mercy Housing speaking to that. I know just that state guidelines do on these funding commitments. They roll out, they give a specific window for applications, and they often reference different areas of state law in regards to funding requirements and timelines. And Mercy would be best to speak on this, but the 65 years was in a component of guidelines that they discovered in their research on this most recent application proposal.
Yeah.
They,
that's the
they were
minimum.
doing that research prior to when we signed the January ENA, unfortunately, and then needed to come back with this. And the reason for that is that it gives them the best opportunity for scoring as high as possible on their funding application, is the part of the reason for this request.
So it was overlooked, or it just wasn't necessary until after January?
I believe it was more of a timing item, but I leave it up to you if you'd like to invite them to speak to that.
Okay. And
Would someone like from Mercy now like to answer that question?
If you'd like, yes, through the
sure. That'd be
council
great.
and mayor.
Yeah.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kelly Hollywood with Mercy Housing. So to answer the question about the 65-year lease term, we are currently applying for Joe Cerna Farm Worker Housing Program grant that's offered through the state HCD department, Housing Community Development Department, under the Supernova application. At the time that we came in January, that language for the final Supernova application and the workbook and the scoring were not released. After that point in time, we have been working with our team to try to put the best application forward. As a threshold for that application is site control, and how you demonstrate site control with the state is to have a long-term form of agreement for that site with the holder of the site, in this case, the city of Half Moon Bay. So the ENA with those terms outlined specifically demonstrates that we are working towards that finalized agreement for 65 years with a potential of a 99-year extension.
Up to 99 years.
I'm sorry.
Not an additional.
Up to 99 years,
Yeah,
thank you, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that explanation, because I know we want to make sure we have that clear as to why it didn't come up in January on the Joe Cerna grant, so hopefully that explains it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And we've talked a couple of times about we're using a model from San Mateo County, and that's why it's the Affordable Housing and Property Disposition Agreement. Is there do we know why the county uses that, the AHPDA, and not the LLDA? I'm trying to figure out why, we started out LLDA in good faith, or DDLA, sorry, I'm getting all these alphabets mixed up. But we started out DDLA, and then we went, and the report mentioned because we're modeling after a county.
Mike, do you have any, the county's agreement with Mercy for the Middlefield Junction project uses the Affordable Housing Property Disposition Agreement. So that's the main reason, but I don't know if Mike, if you have anything further to add, or Matthew.
Not necessarily. I think part of this, with many different jurisdictions and different affordable housing developers, they have a preference on how these agreements or the best practice at the time, and from their years of experience. So honestly, I'm sure the county looks toward affordable housing developers to provide input on their preferred path on these. Not that jurisdictions don't have their own guidelines and best practices if they are processing a lot of developments. We are not processing a lot of 100% affordable housing developments, so we look to other jurisdictions with regards to best practice.
Okay. I got a few more. Probably the city attorney. Do we know of any records of any of the court's preferences of whether referendums regarding city legislative action differs, whether it's an AHPDA or a DDLA?
So you're asking about whether a court has found a particular type of agreement to be legislative and therefore subject to referendum? So there are some cases about this topic. This area, there's a fair amount of case law just because it's sometimes unclear. There are certain types of actions that the council takes that are very clearly legislative, like adopting an ordinance or adopting a general plan or a land use plan. And there are certain types of actions that are very clearly not legislative, like approving a permit is considered to be adjudicative. These types of agreements, sometimes it depends. And what courts look at is whether the agreement basically locks in a certain type of project at a certain type of place, such that the council is really making a policy determination, as opposed to making some sort of administrative or executive determination that either predates or postdates that policy decision in terms of a specific project at a specific location. So as far as I can tell, the courts don't really look at what the agreement's called, but rather whether it is locking in the city to a specific project at a specific location.
So if it would be just coincidental then, if it just so happens a certain name gets thrown out more than another one?
I'm not aware of any court that's looked at an affordable housing property disposition agreement in terms of whether that is legislative or administrative. There is one case involving a DDLA, and now at this point I can't remember whether it was one of the lease agreement types or the loan agreement types. I'd have to go back and look. That I recall the court found was legislative, but it had less to do with what it was called, but rather what it approved.
Okay, so they would, what's the meat of it, or what's inside?
What's the meat of it? Yes, exactly, the substance.
So would approving the amendment tonight be considered legislative action by City Council?
That's another case, would be a first impression. I'm not aware of any court that's looked at an exclusive negotiating agreement. Again, it doesn't lock in the city. You know, under the terms of the January agreement, the city is free to enter into the follow-up AHPDA or not with respect to this particular project or any other project. So I'd say it's unlikely that a court would find that it would be legislative because it does leave, it doesn't, lock the city into this particular project.
And what is the real difference between a lease agreement and a ground lease?
I'm not aware of one, but check with Mike if there's such a difference.
No? Okay. All right. And then part of my, this is going to be hard to relate back, because part of my review, notice, whether it's the City Council Planning Commission and the Architectural Review Committee, there seems the city still needs to develop some zoning regulations related to this parcel. And I'm not sure if the city, how is it yet to be developed? Is it part of an implementation plan? I'm not sure. Is it the zoning? Does anything need to be changed regards to zoning on this parcel?
So it was talked about in Planning Commission, I believe, hearings during the entitlement process, but the main aspect in regards to rezoning the site, it's outlined that the local coastal land use plan is the city's prevailing land use document. So it outlined public service for the 555 Kelly single-family home parcel, and therefore is the guiding land use document certified by the Coastal Commission, and thus our default land use. There are follow-up components that need to be still moved forward in regards to rezoning. So there is a rezoning that will happen, but it does not preclude a developer from applying and using the land use plan. And it's language in the land use plan that that is what I'm speaking to. That makes it the guiding document.
Well, is that part of the workforce overlay?
It is, yeah. Correct.
So we still, and I need to have an explanation exactly what that means. You're kind of telling me something still needs to be done there, but we haven't.
No, nothing needs to be done there. There is a follow-up action that the city needs to take to clean up its zoning ordinances and align with the land use plan. But because we are entirely within the coastal zone, the local coastal land use plan is the lead document in regards to what dictates land use here in Half Moon Bay.
And are we doing this cleanup soon, or?
I don't have a timeline for you. I wasn't prepared to answer a question on that this evening, but I could circle back with our
Okay, that'd be great, because again, I'm just
internally and
finding
get a response
things
to you.
being referenced. I'm like, oh, wow, what about that? Okay.
I can say that the cleanup work is part of the next 2 years work plan that we'll be bringing forward to you shortly. But as Mike said, that is not necessary to move forward a development on this parcel.
Okay. And if we approve this amendment, and let's just say, maybe it's in the ENA and everything, we're covered there, but if, let's say things don't go well in the negotiations, but Mercy's, based on what we've approving goes down a certain path, but the negotiations don't happen, and are we sufficiently protected from harm, from causing harm to Mercy or bad faith if we don't execute the HPDA and ground lease?
The exclusive negotiating agreement that the council approved in January is very clear that the city has discretion to either move forward with the AHPDA or elect not to. So I would say, yes, the city is covered regardless of whether it ultimately results in execution of that follow-up document or not.
Mm-hmm. And then one last thing, I also I saw a section in the ENA that was 2.2 about the financial analysis of the construction. Did we receive that from Mercy?
I can speak to that. There was no change in the financial analysis, so there was nothing to update the city on. It was we've been in negotiation on the AHPDA. There had been no movement on that necessarily. Mercy, in applying for the CERNA and what their ask will be, will likely, when they evaluate what potentially if they're awarded or what they're requesting, they will be readjusting their numbers. That'll be the next milestone, is the funding that they're going to be applying for, which is the Joe Cerna grant. So depending on what they receive there, that will reshuffle their pro forma.
Okay.
So as of right now, there has not been any additional funds that have come in. They have not started on construction drawings. So there are aspects that they are working on, or that we are working through the negotiation period before they update some of those numbers.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. That's it for now.
Thank you, Councilmember Nagengast. Appreciate it. Okay. We will now move on to public comment. Vice Mayor Reddick.
So what is the application deadline for the Joe Cerna grant?
It is April 15th.
April 15th.
Correct.
My understanding
April
was it
15th,
wasn't until
2025.
summer. So no, that's,
So I know that it fluctuates in regards to when the state releases it and asks for deadlines. Mercy would honestly be most well-versed on responding to that, because they're in-house experts on applying to many different funding sources.
Right.
The county, if I'm not mistaken, is closer to summer in regards to the county notice of funding availability that they will release.
could Mercy just address that briefly?
So just to repeat, the question was the timeline for the funding?
You want this change in order to apply for a grant.
Yes.
What is the application deadline for this
The
grant?
application deadline for the Joe Cerna grant is April 15th. The additional funding that we will be applying for and eligible to apply for now that we have entitlements are the county affordable housing funds. They are likely to release the affordable housing funds in the summer. We've been working with the county to kind of understand their timeline, and based on their most recent updates, they plan on releasing AHF 13, as they refer to it, sometime this summer.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Just a clarifying question for the city attorney. So I struggled in sort of trying to figure out the structure of these agreements. So tell me if I'm wrong. So it looks like they're requesting an amendment to the exclusive negotiating agreement. But this is separate from the ADH, the disposition agreement, and the ground lease. So that the disposition agreement and the ground lease still need to be negotiated. By agreeing to a 65-year lease and the term of $1, are we locking ourselves in as you discussed previously? Are we locking ourselves into 65 years and, $1? Because I'm concerned because we're in a process of negotiation right now under the existing ENA. And I'm concerned that the city gives away too much, then we don't have leverage to negotiate the other terms of these agreements. And I'm concerned that on behalf of the public, who is very interested in the disposition of this project, that we, unbeknownst to ourselves, approve something that forecloses on the public's ability to weigh in terms of a referendum. So does this lock us in?
Well, thank you for that question, and we thought about that before coming to you with this proposal. And I will say, if you look at the language of the resolution that the council is considering, it includes the words proposed payment of $1 per year, proposed ground lease term of at least 65 years. And that was language that city staff was added to the Mercy's proposal and was acceptable to Mercy. And it really is for this very reason. We are still in negotiations about the term and the price and all of those things. And so the intent of this is not to tie our hands at all in concluding, working on those negotiations as we work on bringing forward the AHPDA and the ground lease.
Thank you.
Okay. We will now take comments from the public. Why don't we start out with some folks who actually are online. They always have to wait till the very last. So go through here. So we got, we have Shauna Pickett-Gordon. I see is back. So we could start with her.
Thank you very much, City Council. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Thank you for approving the ENA in January. That gives City and Mercy Housing time to work together on a ground lease and affordable housing agreement. I support the amendment to the ENA so 555 Kelly can meet requirements for a long-term affordable ground lease as required by state and county funding programs for affordable housing. And it's really encouraging that Mercy is going after that state and county funds available this year as we speak to help build 555 Kelly. This is really important to me as a Coast-Sider. For 35 years, I've watched as adequate, dignified housing became scarcer and less possible for people without high-tech incomes. Market price apartments cost at least 3 times what most essential workers can afford, but we can't afford to be without those workers here on the coast side. In particular, our senior farm workers who have spent their lives making fresh food possible for our tables. They deserve decent, safe housing that is affordable to them on what they make in our fields and on our farms. They've worked for us for generations, and after so many years, we can do this for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next person is Gloria Stofan.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good evening, City Council members and City staff. My name is Gloria Stofan, a longtime resident and homeowner of Pacifica and a member of Coastside Faith in Action. I come before you urging you to approve an amendment to the Inclusive Negotiating Agreement, the ENA. The ENA, I understand, was approved in January, as was already discussed. I thank you all as leaders of this community in doing so. Now the approval of the amendment to this ENA gives the city of Half Moon Bay and Mercy Housing time to work together on a long-term agreement which considers ground leasing and affordable housing. January 23, 2023 is still very much on people's minds here on the coast. It was like an atomic bomb had hit our beautiful coastline. And then the farm workers whole living conditions drew attention to the whole country. The reports of their living conditions was like this was a third world country, not about a picturesque small oceanside town surrounded by farms and nurseries. I was so elated when I heard about 555 Kelly as a site for senior farm workers, and I applaud city staff and city council members for moving ahead with this project. However, now approval of this needed amendment to the ENA is necessary to be included in its application for state and county funding. Please, I urge you to approve this amendment so that our deserving senior farm workers can live with dignity and respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Our next speaker is Mike Farrar.
Good evening, council members. Mike Ferreira, Half Moon Bay. I have addressed this project before. I must have been negligent in following the process. And so I had thought this negotiation was being done, the lease negotiation was being done by 2 council members, and that it was being heard in closed session. I have seen it in closed session. I'm not seeing this as a report out from closed session. And so I am surprised. I'm also surprised by the Joe Cerna thing, but then maybe that's because I don't fully understand the Joe Cerna thing, but I had thought that that was a path to ownership. And so ownership at 555 Kelly is a whole new thought, to me at least. And so that's a bit of a surprise. And as to some of the questions that the council members have already asked, there was more than enough signatures already gathered for a referendum, and people that processed that still have all those names, and they've been waiting for this negotiation to finish, which was once projected to take a year, which seemed odd, but now it's even longer term. And of course, there are problems with the project that are driving that referendum. The fifth floor, the lack of parking, the what we consider spurious designation as a transit center. So this is all, it's a big puzzle that I'm speaking to here, especially I'm not quite convinced that if the city were to change its mind by referendum in the voice of the people, would the city be liable for all of the loans and agreements that Mercy enters into? So it just seems to me there's a lot of liability potential here. So that's all that I have to say. Things are not very clear. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Mike.
Oh, all right, thanks.
Happy birthday. Thank you. I feel there's some clarification right now, actually. Those signatures were gathered regarding the granting of whether the permit was referendable, correct? Okay, so just wanted to clarify that difference, and I don't know if there would have to be new signatures all over to start, is my understanding. So want to clarify that point. And also the bit about the Joe Cerna money being more about ownership. I felt that Mercy had a clarification on that. Is that?
Staff can start if you'd like. So Joe Cerna does have two funding components to it. There's ownership and rental. Ownership tends to be less applied to. There's less projects that meet some of those provisions for ownership projects. And on the rental side, it is much more competitive, but the state allocates funding to both types of projects under that grant program.
Great. Thank you. Just didn't want to wait and forget to clarify that when we can right now. Great, thank you. Next person, Ellen Hage. Ellen Hage. Can you unmute? Oh, there. Ellen, I think you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, we'll move on. And Ellen, if you can unmute, we'll come back to you. Carlisle Young, please.
Thank
You're
you.
up. Thank you.
Maybe as long as you're doing clarifications, originally when they were talking about 555 Kelly, they were talking about applying for a 100% affordable housing grant. But if now that it has a mixed use component on the ground floor, does that make it less desirable to get funding? I've always wondered why they allowed them to put in a mixed use property when you get much better deals on 100% affordable housing and not mixed use. Thank you. If you can answer it would be great.
Thank you, Carla.
Sure.
I'm happy to jump in on this if you'd like us to answer.
Thanks.
The ground floor uses I think she's referring to are in support of the affordable housing, which is a very traditional component of affordable housing. So I think, and the initial proposal that we received through the RFQ included that component. So I don't think anything's changed. Mike has more experience with affordable housing if that changes how it's seen for funders.
No, our relationship with Mercy and other housing developers is, it's a consistent interest for developers to include resources for low-income tenants that are going to be living on site. So the commercial portion often is residential focused or community focused. It really depends on the development itself. But not to say that there couldn't be 100% affordable development that had other commercial uses, but mostly in those commercial spaces is resources for those community members.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Let's see, I think that's all online, right? Okay, Ellen Hage. Great. You're unmuted. Thanks.
Thanks. Good evening, City Council members. My name is Ellen Haig. I'm a leader with Coastside Faith in Action. Thank you for your support for the 555 Kelly Avenue Senior Housing Development for Farm Workers. I support the amendment to the ENA so that 555 Kelly can meet the requirements for a long-term affordable ground lease as required by state and county funding programs for affordable housing. I've lived on the coast for many years, and the 555 Kelly housing is very important to me because I believe the farm workers deserve decent and affordable housing. They are members of our community that I respect and honor for their years of hard work growing the food that we enjoy. I'll close with a quote from Father Greg Boyle, the founder of Homeboy Industries. We are all called to fashion a world in which we are the front porch of the house everyone wants to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay, I think that's it for, oops. So we'll move to our audience who's here this evening. And when I call your name, please come up to the podium. First person up is Joanne Rakoski.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. I thank you for the privilege of speaking tonight. My name is Joanne Rakoski. I'm a Coastside resident, a member of Coastside Faith in Action and Faith in Action Bay Area. And first, thank you so much for approving the ENA back in January. Tonight, I'm speaking in favor of the amendment that's proposed that will add a lease term of 65 years and payment of $1 a year for this ENA. The amendment will allow Mercy Housing to pursue additional state, county, and federal funding. We know that farm workers on the coast side continue to live in housing that is crowded and often in poor repair. The proposed housing at 555 Kelly is a small step towards providing dignified housing for our farm worker population, and it will contribute to the city's housing element. I tutor children from both Hatch and El Granada schools, and I see firsthand how the lack of a quiet place to study and learn and do their homework contributes to their challenges in mastering the reading and other skills that are required of elementary school children. I believe that our children are the future of our community. I want all our children to have an opportunity to thrive in this community. So having safe and affordable housing, such as that which will be provided by 555 Kelly, is a key step, or is a key toward that goal. I urge you to pass the proposed amendment. It's one more step to making this project a reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joanne. Our next speaker is Suzanne Moore.
Good evening. Suzanne Moore, Sitting Board Member of Healthcare for the Homeless and Farm Worker Board, and coastal resident for going on 30 years. Speaking for myself this evening. I appreciate the work that this council and staff and our community members have done on 555 Kelly, and I support the staff recommendations. I like Mike's perspective on tonight's vote as a milestone. Behind us lies housing that was substandard and unaffordable. Ahead is safe and affordable farm worker housing, housing for the very folks who nourish us. This council has been leading the way. You are our public servants and guides on this challenging journey. This is not the time to lose sight of our worthy destination or lose our way. Please, council, carry on. Provide Mercy Housing the tools to create housing at the end of this journey. Bring us all, by safe passage, home. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Our next speaker is Noreen Cooper Hevlin.
Thanks for not pronouncing my last name Hevelin. Many people do. It's a terrible image. Anyway, it's wonderful to be here to speak to you today. Thank you very much. My name is Noreen Cooper Hevlin, and I'm speaking on behalf of Coastside Faith in Action and our local Unitarian Universalist Church in Half Moon Bay. My hope today is that the City Council will amend the exclusive negotiations agreement between Mercy Housing and the City of Half Moon Bay so that it aligns with the requirements for state and county funding. This request is both simple around the details of the E&A and essential because it sets up 555 Kelly Project, a project conceived with such compassion to receive funding from the state of California and the county of San Mateo. And now I get to go off script. So the problem is that it's hard to build affordable housing. It's so much easier to make a profit if you put a single family home together and then it costs you maybe $500,000 and you charge $2.5 million. So not everybody wants to do this. And we had only one bid on this public housing project, which was from Mercy Housing. And my concern is that we really have to see this through. If we want more public housing to be built here in Half Moon Bay, we have to make sure that people know that we're reliable partners and we stick to our word and we have a commitment that we need affordable housing. We do not need to be like another Mill Valley or Marin. Nobody can staff the restaurants there because nobody can live there and just afford minimum wage. So I just want to commend you for being committed to affordable housing here in Half Moon Bay for the farm workers first, and then let's move beyond to other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen. Our next speaker is Sandy Vela.
Hi there. My name is Sandy Vela. I've lived on the coast for over 60 years. I ask that we actually don't sign the amendment. And I've got several concerns and recommendations that I'd like to convey. I'd like to make sure that we retain the public right of referendum in any amendments or contracts that we sign. The public needs to have a voice. We need to make sure we don't inadvertently sign our rights away. And we need to avoid gotchas or any loopholes in writing where we go, oh my God, what did we just sign away? Kind of like what Deborah was saying earlier. We need to make sure that we have the right set of experts that are actively engaged within the process and they have their eyes on exactly, their areas of expertise. So if we need to look and hire a real estate attorney, let's do it. So we don't get in trouble, 70 years from now and make a mistake. Second item is, I'd suggest we don't address single terms in one-off negotiations or amendments. Let's get all the terms up front and ensure anything we do in writing is negotiated and balanced, and we clearly understand each item. Next, drilling down into the newly suggested term of the lease, why is the city of Half Moon Bay looking at providing a lease to Lost Mercy at $1 for 65 years? What does the city get in return? Has the city of Half Moon Bay done a cost analysis for the requested item? I'm sure we have. Can we see this? My back of the napkin calculations indicate if we charged Lost and Mercy $10K a month for event and office space for 65 years, the city of Half Moon Bay would end up with $7.8 million. Add to that another $5.2 million for occupant rental charges that I understand the city might not even be compensated for. The total of that is $13 million without even considering rent increases over that time of 65 years. So is the Lost and Mercy providing $13 million in services? Do we know that already? I'd say that we don't sign it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sandy. Our next speaker is Rocio Aula.
So she's going to provide her comment, and then I'm going to provide the interpretation afterwards.
Buenas tardes, alcalde y miembros del concilio y personas presentes. Mi nombre es Rocío Ávila y soy miembro del Comité de Viviendas Justas. Primero que nada, quiero agradecer al condado y a la ciudad y a todos los que han hecho posible que el 830 Stone Pine haya empezado a recibir las aplicaciones para poder vivir en este lugar. Va a ser un sueño hecho realidad para las familias que lleguen a vivir ahí después de todas las desgracias que han sucedido y las carencias que han pasado. Este lugar dará felicidad a familias y a niños que han deseado tener una casa, un lugar que podrán llamar su hogar. Después de esto paso a lo siguiente. Quiero expresar la importancia que tiene para nuestra comunidad campesina de mayor edad la construcción de 555 Kelly. La negociación y la espera ha sido larga y difícil, pero estamos comprometidos con encontrar una solución. Entiendo que los trámites pueden ser lentos, pero creo que en sus manos está el poder hacer que hoy puedan aprobar esta enmienda. Les pido que consideren la urgencia de esta situación y trabajen para encontrar una solución que beneficie a nuestra comunidad. Agradezco su tiempo y consideración. Muchas gracias.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and all people present here. My name is Rocio Avila, and I am a member of the Just Housing Committee. First of all, before anything, I just want to thank you to the county and the city for everything that they've done possible over at 830 Stone Pine. They've been beginning to receive applications to go and live in this place. It's going to be a dream come true for some families that get to finally live there after all of the unfortunate happenings that have occurred and the lack of housing that in the past. This place will provide happiness to families and children that have desired to have a house, a place where they can call home. After this, I will move on to the following. So I also want to express the importance that, express how important it is to our community, farm worker community, and people, older farm workers, the construction of 555 Kelly. The wait and all of the negotiations have been long and difficult, but we are committed to finding a solution. I understand that sometimes processes can be slow, but I believe that in your hands is the power to approve this amendment. So I'm asking you to consider the urgency of this situation and work to find a solution that would benefit our community. Thank you for your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocio, and thank you for the great translation. Appreciate it. Next speaker is Jennifer Moore.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city employees. I'm Jennifer Moore. I've lived here for 53 years. My family's been here for, I think we're going on 4 generations. This community is my home. My roots are deep. I want nothing but the best for farm workers, for anyone that's in this community. But we need to think about this as a whole community. So my big first question is something that I feel like we've never really gotten a true answer for. I would love to have Mercy Allah City Council be clear on how we will pick tenants for the retired farm worker housing at 555 Kelly Avenue. My understanding is if we take state, federal funding, Section 8, whatever that, all of that we can take people from anywhere. This is supposed to be for our farm workers, that's what we're promising them. Is that gonna happen? That would make a lot of us community members feel a lot better about this project. So it's only fair for you guys to let the farm workers, us in the community, know what the process is gonna be. So please clarify and be transparent. My other concern is, we have not a lot of resources here. What is the plan to bring in more resources? We have 2 police officers that monitor Half Moon Bay. That's it. That's not enough. And I'm not saying this because they're gonna bring in crime or anything. I'm just saying we need fire, we need an ER, we need urgent care. I went to try to go on a Monday, it's not even open. We need it on the weekends. We need it at night. We need resources here. So, with that said, with any negotiations at 55 Kelly Avenue, please make sure we, the people, retain the right for referendum of any contracts or amendments made. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our next speaker is Vaughn Harrison.
Well, I'm Vaughn Harrison, and I'm a member of Coastside Faith in Action in the Coastside Jewish community, and I don't think I need to repeat all the reasons why we need housing for our senior farm workers. I just do want to remind you that many farm workers don't retire because they can't afford to retire, so they may be senior farm workers still working. But I hope we see this in my lifetime and in their lifetime.
Thank you, Vaughn. Our next speaker is Joaquin Jimenez.
Thank you. Good evening, once again, Mayor, council members, city staff, members of the public. 555 Kelly, it's a project that actually came to at one point divide the community. This project is not about Alas, it's not about Mercy Housing. This is about our farm workers. We have an aging population of farm workers. If you have an opportunity, visit the farms. Go up north, Leah's farm. You have an aging population of farm workers. There's a very small group under 50. Most of them are over 50. If you go to Justice Farm, there is an aging population. You go to down 92, the local farms, same thing. We have an aging population of farm workers. Farming is a heritage of the coast, or based on the economy of the coast. People that have been here for 60 years, they, for 4 generations, they know, the Half Moon Bay was built on farming and ranching and fishing. 555 Kelly, it's a dream that can come true to many farm workers, many of our community members. We don't have enough units in there for all the aging farm workers. My parents are retired farm workers. They're not going to live there. We have, just like them, they have other farm workers that retired for several years, and they're not going to see that place to be built. I agree with Jennifer. I do agree that the funding that we receive, make sure is for local farm workers. Not the same thing that happened at the senior housing on Main Street. Make sure that is clear to our community that the funding that Mercy is going to receive, is going to be applying for, is going to be for our local farm workers. Not 30% of the local farm workers, but 100% of the local farm workers to go into the housing. I know there is a question about traffic, about safety. That was probably the worst comment I heard. We have our children across the street. We're going to have place farm workers there. What did that mean by that? The farm workers are going to be preying on the children across Cunha? That was ridiculous. Patrick, thank you. Councilmember Patrick, thank you for supporting 555 Kelly during the public, during the candidate forum. The question was asked, if you support developing the 555 Kelly, and you say yes, thank you, I support you.
Thank you, Joaquin. Next speaker is Nancy Fontana.
Hi, thank you. The mayor and council members and staff. I'm not here to speak for or against the actual approval on this. I'm more concerned right now because the project's been approved. This is a procedural thing, and I understand that. I spoke against the project when it was the appropriate time. However, I did bring up during the priority setting meeting the potential impact of tariffs on any project the city is doing. And I still have that concern, and I haven't heard anyone mention that tonight. And I think staff and the developers should include at all, at any numerous stages, the potential impacts on the cost, because the public expressed a great deal of concern about the cost per unit on this project. And I think that the council, the city, the developer might all have to consider at some point going back to the original plan, a smaller profile. You could still accommodate a large number. I don't figure these numbers out, so this might not be right, but I think the addition of extra 2-bedroom units impacts how many seniors will be accommodated at the building. If you reduce those, so if the tariffs make it where you can't afford this project as it is, you go back to the other plan, you may still be able to accommodate or work out something that you accommodate the number of seniors. And that's who this project is for. It's not, and with regard to the issue of being by a school, I think the concern was a safety on traffic, because when you have families living in that building, there are going to be people driving in and out, a lot more than you would if it was just seniors. I don't think they were worried about predators. Okay, so the second thing is more procedural. I brought up at the last meeting when this matter was on the agenda, I get nervous, I can't talk right, but I brought up my concern about the item being approved with regard to this project, that it wouldn't interfere with the public's right for referendum. And it's been brought up again. Even one of our council members wasn't sure because of the language.
Nancy, your time is up.
I understand. I would suggest that staff and the city attorney include on all, and not just this project, on anything, just a blurb at the end of the staff report. The action in this is administrative, the action in this is legislative, or if it's a combination of both, identify which is which. You would have saved a lot of time at the meeting, and I could have talked longer. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bill Hevlin.
Thank you, esteemed council members and mayor. My name is Bill Hevlin. And to remember, that's like heaven with a little L in it. I'm one of the principal lay leaders of the Unitarian Universalist Coastside community, which is centered here in Half Moon Bay, and I'm also a member of Coastside Faith in Action. And in January, I spoke in favor of the exclusive negotiating agreement with Mercy Housing. So thank you for doing that. Now before you is an amendment that aligns this ENA with the detailed requirements for funding long-term affordable housing. Basic stuff for getting affordable housing funded. Basic stewardship on your part. And these basic tweaks sustain Half Moon Bay's reputation, both as a compassionate community and also as a great place to do business. A city that honors its word. Basic governance. Basic governance. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Bill. This ends our public comment. Thank you all public for coming out tonight and giving us your comments and thoughts. Appreciate it. And we hear you. We are now going to take an exactly 5-minute break till 8:45, and we'll come right back. Thank you.
Do you write everyone's comments? Why? Huh? Oh. Do you think they'll do it?
We are resuming our meeting. If everyone can have a seat, we'll resume.
It's so cold in here. I should have made hot water like Maggie.
If everyone can have a seat, we're about to resume. What is up here?
Jeez.
Have a seat. Thank you.
Through the chair, just a couple of questions for Matthew. Does the city have any debt on the acquisition of 555 Kelly? Any outstanding debt?
We do not. The 55 Kelly property was paid for out of city reserves.
That's what I thought.
Back in 2017.
And so, say this project gets built, would there be property tax and who would pay it?
That is a good question. I don't believe that affordable housing falls into a taxable use, but Mike, do you know offhand?
I've looked to Mercy on what present standards are for that, just because they would have other projects.
That's true. They own other properties and operate them.
If that's
Is that okay if they respond to this?
As 100% affordable housing, we would qualify under the property tax welfare exemption program, so we would pay no property taxes. Yeah, as long as we maintain the affordability under a certain level.
So if indeed it were converted to market in the future, that would have to start
If
paying?
it was above market, if it was above a certain area median income level, then yes.
Great.
Can I ask a
Thank you.
question for
Sure.
Mercy?
Yeah.
While she's up.
Yeah, could you come back for 1 second?
So one of the concerns that I have been hearing also through a lot of people is how are we going to...
Patrick, I'm sorry. I don't think your mic is picking you up.
Sorry. A lot of people's concerns are about are there truly going to be farm workers from Half Moon Bay at this facility? And that has been brought up to me numerous times. You're hearing it tonight too. How's that process going to work? Do you have that figured out? I know it's way down the line, but it's something that I think would ease the tension if there was a true answer on that.
It's currently written into the conditions of approval that's a preference for agriculture workers in the coast side. So we are doing everything to maintain that. We're going to continue to work with the ad hoc committee that's been established to kind of go through the regulations and the legal requirements for that, as long as we're in line with where our funding lies. So as we and are kind of going after more additional funding, we need to make sure that we can stay within line of those preferences of where they are. So I would say it's in process.
If I may add to that, if that's okay. I just would point out the Stone Pine Cove development. It does have preferences. The county moved forward with preferences, so they evaluated the legal parameters of having a preference for farm workers. And the majority of farm workers in San Mateo County, although there could be farm workers on the other side of the hill in other jurisdictions, many are throughout the coast side from Montera down through Pescadero and to the southern border of the county. So, and through targeted marketing, and therefore there are additional measures that could be taken into place. So just adding on to what Kelly has shared from Mercy, and just pointing out that there's direct correlation with that project at Stone Pine Cove in regards to preferences for local farm workers.
And then I have a question for staff, for Mike or for Matthew. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. And it had to do with the fact that, because the first thing that everybody kind of points out to is, but then there was a lot of clarity there. The amendment would add the proposed lease term of 65 years, proposed payment of $1 per year. That stands out. I brought that forward to you in the phone call, which we were granted to have with you and ask questions, because I knew that was going to stand out, because that stood out for somebody else that read it and brought it to my attention. You gave me a great explanation. I was wondering if Mike or Matthew could just go through that process of that. Why is it set at $1? And people think, we could be getting 10,000 or 1,000 or something. There's a set in their mind. And if you can clarify that, please.
Sure, happy to answer that question. And as discussed earlier, again, the ENA does not lock us in to that being the ultimate rate that gets negotiated, nor the time period, but there's reasons why that's being asked. Typically, when a public agency is looking to incentivize affordable housing development in their community, which is something we were doing, the land is kind of the skin in the game. It's what the city can provide to promote development of affordable housing, because as we know, it's challenging to get it built otherwise. And one of the ways that we can do that is either by giving land or leasing the land at a below market rate, which lowers the ongoing operating costs of the project and reduces the amount of fundraising that needs to go into the development of the project. And so in this case, I believe that's why Mercy is requesting that lower rate, as it helps the overall financial implications of the project. Again, no guarantee that that's where we'll land, but it's pretty typical for a public agency to provide the land at little or no cost.
So that would be our offering, and then Mercy and Alas would be their offering back by building. So it's basically what we're giving, and then they're going to give back so that we can provide something for our
Yeah,
community.
it turns it into a partnership, yeah.
Here's another question I have. Avila, she spoke earlier. Thank you, appreciate that. But I keep hearing the slow process, but I don't think a process like this, of this nature and this size in this town, I probably asked this before, are we slow? Is this pretty slow right now, or is this about normal speed?
So others may have heard me say this before, and I'm happy to share. So many affordable housing development projects are typically on anywhere from 5 to 7 year timelines. So we began the process in early 2022. So we're 3 years in, essentially, 3.5, or getting closer to 3.5, I should say. So we're at a expected point here, but I would say a critical point in regards to Mercy needing to reach certain funding milestones. And without reaching those, then that delays their process. So if they don't receive state funding or county funding this year, they're waiting in another year to be granted those funds, which are necessary before they can reach their construction loans and financing plan fully. So there are stages and layered financing. The city contributions are typically brought forward up front so the developer knows what to work into their pro forma. I'm happy to share more.
So it's pretty much on track. We're not slow. It's just normal pace right now.
We're at an expected timeline, but again, this year is very critical in regards to how the project moves forward.
And then I have a question to the city attorney. I keep hearing liability potential and referendum. And those two keep coming up. Can you clarify that and give an answer to that, please?
Liability potential, that may refer to a situation where the city elects not to enter into the follow-up agreements. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I heard the question.
To clarify, is the question, does entering into this amendment to the ENA increase the city's liability related to this project? Is that what you're looking for?
Are we making sure down the road that we're signing something, doing the right process, and it's not going to come back and because we did something wrong and it's going to cost us a lawsuit? Is this the right process? Are we doing it the right way? Because there's people that are bringing up liability, potential liability, but it's the process. And is this the right process? Is this everything that we're supposed to be doing? Because it seems awkward that something that wasn't added in, now it's added in. So it seems, if you're not sitting there watching this day by day, every episode, you're jumping in, you're kind of going, what's going on? Are we in the right process?
I mean, I'll just respond that it is standard to have one of these exclusive negotiating agreements. I think what's somewhat unusual here is that it did expire, and then on the request of Mercy, the city entered into a new one in January, and then it didn't include this language that is being requested of you as part of this amendment, and for the reasons that Mike and Mercy explained related to the new information regarding the Joe Cerna grant qualifications. Does that answer your question?
I think that's a key thing, the Joe Cerna thing, because as that got brought forward, it's obvious that it has to have a key thing in that for that grant to work. So now they're asking for that key thing to be put in. I'm doing this more for the people at home and watching on TV, because if you're jumping in, you don't know what's going on, it doesn't sound right. So I want to make sure that people get it, what we're trying to do and what they're trying to do and what the city's trying to do.
And as far as this action tonight, this doesn't increase the city's liability, and nor does it extend the time of the ENA. It's still a one-year agreement. It just does have this, you might call it magic language. I mean, it's language that Mercy has requested that it's going to help it score better in terms of the the grant process.
Also to that, my understanding is, and thank you for that question, it's not just a loan for Joe Cerna, but extending the ENA establishes that Mercy has control of the site for any future, grant applications and money that comes in. So that's key, just to extend their right to negotiate on behalf, they're the builders. Establish that officially ongoing. So that's how I was reading it.
That's how I read it too. It's almost like, why would we loan something to you if you don't have the right to that property? So that's what this whole process is all about.
Right, but future sources of income, want to see that in writing, so that'll be continued. Is that right? Is that right? Have that right?
Yes,
Okay.
I think I might have heard you say extend the agreement. I did just want to clarify that this would not extend the agreement. It still is just a one-year term to January of 2026.
Sorry, I meant through that one-year term, right?
Yes.
Right, compared to that guy. Got a question? Yeah.
And it's not maybe so much a question. I'm sitting here, part, I guess, is the deliberations. And here on April 15th is the first time I heard this. And I feel I was whacked, and to me, negotiations are negotiations, right? And to me, this is a big chunk of a negotiation item, is providing a 65-year lease at $1 a year. And I would have hoped, and I'm trying to be transparent, I promised the community I'd be transparent. And I wanted to be able to provide something to the community in order, I was prepared to continue this item so we could bring items back to the community and show what we've done with this in order to provide something, because I think this is an item to negotiate. The Mercy's had 2.5 years, you count the two ENAs, to look for funding. They've had 9 months since June, when the appeals were denied, to negotiate. And here we are, and then we did something in July, and then, okay, it didn't get in, so we were going to do this tonight. And now I find out it's due April 15th. So I just, I'm just expressing my frustration that, here, you guys got to act on it tonight. And maybe not. Maybe you could continue it, and we could do some quick negotiations in a week or so. But I'm just telling you how I'm feeling, and it really caught me off. I feel, I don't know, I feel this thing gets piecemeal, and all of a sudden this thing just showed up on April 1st, and we have to act on it now. It's just how I'm feeling.
I'm not sure I understand the concern, but would Mercy like to respond to that, or anything there to?
Hi, Rainey Dare from Mercy Housing. I totally appreciate what you're saying, and it wasn't our intent to sidestep the negotiation or kind of drop it on you. I think we were trying to simultaneously use the NA period to restart the negotiation, because we did have some negotiation or discussion with the previous iteration of the ad hoc in the fall. And then I think for scheduling reasons, we didn't reconvene. And so we do have a meeting, I think, next week with the current iteration of the ad hoc. And kind of that happened while we were trying to work on this funding application. And so it's kind of unfortunate coincidental timing that we didn't negotiate some of this stuff beforehand with you. And that's not our intent. Our intent is to really, how can we keep this development moving forward for the city, go after this funding, which only comes once a year. It's not in the governor's budget for next year. So it seems like a great opportunity for us to secure funding that would allow for this development to
be more real for folks, because we're conscious of the fact that there are some people who are asking about, why can't we move faster? And so we're trying our best to kind of maintain competitiveness for those funding sources, as well as be able to work with the ad hoc and eventually the full council on the negotiations. So I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Okay. So let's deliberate. How are people, and I realize we don't have, well, anyway, yeah. Start deliberations.
So I just want to say that I agree with Councilmember Nagengast. I too feel kind of cornered by your grant application date, not knowing it. As you're well aware of the language in the ENA, the cornerstone is being able to negotiate in good faith. And good faith means like not blindsiding people on information. It means being as transparent as possible about what your context is and what you need, so that we can be accountable to the public. So I just wanted to make that reminder that negotiating in good faith requires all those things. And we need to do that going forward. I don't want to be blindsided again on dates. That said, I did do a little late afternoon research online and before coming to the meeting. And the question came up about DDLA and what does it mean? And I found disposition and loan agreements. I found disposition and lease agreements. It's like different cities used different things, and it didn't seem to come down to what they were actually doing. It's like the name they used, the convention they used. And I found quite a few people doing, AD, whatever it is. I don't like those big, long acronyms. So I think we can be sort of comfortable in the appellations for different things and what people use to, communicate their own, situations. And I think the city attorney and the city manager would tell you that I have grilled them over this issue of being transparent with the public about, not locking ourselves in, honoring the public's request for transparency and being a partner in all this. And I've reached a point, I think, where I feel comfortable with what they're telling me about this, about referendability or, whatever it is, that the city is not losing anything by approving this amendment, other than feeling, chafed and annoyed about the process. So I spent a lot of time with this and struggled over this, but I think I'm going to approve the amendment in the knowledge that the city's not locking itself in, our negotiations are safe, and I would add to that I think we need to move on the negotiations. Don't let them drag out. Be clear about each other, about where we're at, so we can bring forward something to the public to see. The public has just seen this long process. They don't know what's going on. We're meeting in closed session. So I think we need to be accountable. We need to also be prompt in our negotiations and transparent on the outcomes. So that's where I'm coming down tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel the more and more I learn tonight on this, and especially with the date, because it came on our screen and we're like, yeah, but Paul pointed it out, it's pretty quick. That I'd like to see definitely more transparency and good faith in what we're doing here and what you guys are trying to do. And so we don't have this feeling, people watching the TV, coming to me, emailing me, asking questions. That's what I'd like to see a little bit more ahead of the game versus very at the last minute. Because last minute things, people start wondering what's really going on. And there's a lot of language in here that's very difficult for people to understand. I didn't understand it. It's not something I do all day long, so you have to bite into it and understand it, ask questions with staff, other people that work. Then you start getting the whole concept. But I feel comfortable after asking these questions and after talking to staff today on my break, I feel a little bit more comfortable, so I'm going to say yes. But I definitely want to see more, not last-minute Charlie stuff going on here.
Yeah, I'm ready to move forward to approve the ENA this evening, and and to move forward with our negotiations and keep it moving quicker as possible. I don't want to see any funding jeopardized. It's a difficult project, a lot of issues involved, and I trust that this council can work it out, and if there are things that can't be worked out, we will know that we did our best. So, would anyone like to make the motion? I move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an amendment to the exclusive negotiations agreement, ENA, dated June 30th, 2025, between the City of Half Moon Bay and Mercy Housing, California, that provides 12 months to negotiate an affordable housing and property disposition agreement, and the terms of a ground lease for a senior affordable housing development at 555 Kelly Avenue. The amendment would add the proposed lease term of 65 years and proposed payment of $1 per year. Second.
I'll second that motion.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Councilmember Nagengast?
No.
Vice Mayor Reddick?
Yes.
Mayor Brownstone?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, part of transparency is getting feedback and accepting it and learning from it. It's pretty loud and clear that one of the things that would have made this a better process is if the staff report had been clear on the urgency around the item tonight, that a decision really needed to be made in order to meet the funding deadline. So I heard that loud and clear, and that'll be considered in future staff reports as well, and appreciate the feedback.
And I'd like to add something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Nancy had a great idea about, the beginning of the staff reports for various decisions when we're talking about, whether there's fiscal impacts or whatever. It'd be great to say, this is a ministerial decision, which that wouldn't say, because that's usually done by staff outside of the council dais. But is it legislative? Is it administrative? It'd be good for us and the public to understand, what kind of a decision it is that we're making. So I'd like to recommend that moving forward.
I have that in my notes as well. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Next item on the agenda. Is the update on the residential rental registration program. And this is just a matter of getting an update.
All right, so you have Irma and I for another item, so we'll stay right here at the staff table. Again, for anyone who's just tuning in, Mike Noche, Housing Programs Manager for the city. I am joined by Irma Acosta, our administrative analyst, who's been vital to the launch of our residential rental registration program. Irma will start by providing some background on the program, and I will grab a few of the slides halfway through and provide some additional background for you as well.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening again. Like Mike mentioned, I will just provide a little bit of context and background on the rental registry program. So in regards to the implementation, on November 7, 2023, City Council held a study session around tenant protections. And out of this discussion, City Council directed staff to work on a residential rental registration ordinance accompanied by other tenant protection measures. And following that, February 7, 2024, the residential rental registration ordinance was passed. The city contracted with Ptolemy in order to facilitate compliance and convenience for property owners. During this time as well, city staff focused on outreach and noticing any suspected rental units. On June 1st, 2024, registration officially started. The city adopted a no-fee registration period that went from June 1st till June 30th. Additionally, following that, the city actually extended that no-fee registration period till July 31st. And beginning August 1st, a $75 per unit fee was applied to this registration. And during this time as well, there was an additional rent stabilization registration that was introduced. Following that year, later that year in October, the city began issuing citation warnings to those landlords that were out of compliance with the registration. Earlier this year, in 2025, the city has entered its code enforcement phase for the program. So we are working now to enforce registration for the programs. A little bit of background in terms of the data. So staff suspected that there was around 5,000 housing stock within city limits. Out of these 5,000 units, we were able to identify around 1,300 suspected rentals within city limits. As of recently, the total number of units registered is around 1,048. And out of these, there is approximately 370 units that are subject to our rent stabilization ordinance, which means that there's around a 79% compliance rate. The image above illustrates all the rental properties that are registered. So every little dot represents a registered unit with the city. You can see predominantly a lot of these are kind of centered in our downtown area as well as other neighborhoods. So some lessons learned. There was a couple challenges during the initial rollout of the program. While staff primarily focused on outreach and educating landlords and tenants on the program and the registration requirements, this still created a high volume of technical questions and ongoing support for tenants and landlords with the registration process. Additionally, we also experienced a lot of people not being in agreeing with the program. So we definitely heard a lot about that. And in terms of the clarifying the scope of the registration, the wide range of suspected rentals that we targeted created an extended volume of inquiries in terms of the clarifications about the interpretation of the ordinance and the application of certain provisions of the ordinance. And some of these were around vacant homes and second homes, as well as family member owner-occupied properties that Mike will go over a little bit more in his slides. But yeah.
Thank you, Irma. And just to build on Irma's last point, the outreach that was performed, we blanketed any suspected rental, meaning folks who potentially had a different tax address than their primary residence and so forth. So where there were aspects of combing through owner data that our Ptolemy database and folks that we contracted with, which is our registration portal, was able to assist us with. However, it was still a heavy lift in regards to city staff on combing through that data and deciding who was getting these letters in regards to suspected rentals. But our approach was to cast a very wide net and ensure folks were aware in case they weren't on our radar, potentially. That being said, there were a couple policy questions, one of which you've heard about, but we wanted to re-elevate it to you. We did go back to City Council in July, seeking some direction. Part of the reason we went to City Council is, as Irma mentioned, we had originally planned for a 1-month free registration period to incentivize compliance with the program. We thought it was best to extend that through the end of July, as Irma mentioned, but so that July 16th staff report, which is linked in the current staff report for this item, did speak to a nuance in regards to folks who own a home and have a family member potentially living in the home, and essentially boiled down to the definition of a tenant. And at that time, the direction from City Council was to have those units still register. If the primary owner did not live in that residence, it was a decision by that owner to essentially rent, even if rent wasn't being charged, but to provide that housing unit to a family member, even if they were not, the primary owner was not living there. So that was one component, policy item that came up that we wanted to re-elevate to council this evening. The other is a more recent concern that we've heard from affordable housing providers, 100% affordable housing providers, in regards to the fee that is charged. We had 2 developers who took advantage of the free window, and another who ended up having to pay fees on, I believe it was roughly 100 or if not more affordable units. And all 3 of our local affordable housing developers, Mercy, Leslie, and Mid-Penn Housing, have all expressed concerns with the fee moving forward. That was to be expected. We knew that they are on slim margins in regards to how they operate. So we did expect to hear from them. I think the city's path forward on that was sound in regards to incentivizing all rental housing units to register in the program, and that we expected to potentially come back to City Council on that policy concern that might arise, and it did. Staff also receives the question of where's the value in regards to the rental registration. What some of the overview in regards to the mapping and where rental units are located. It does give the city greater understanding of our rental market, locations of the unit as mentioned, and potentially could benefit future land use decisions. This is speculating, but it is information that could come in handy. It also, in regards to single family homes specifically, we did not have any idea really exactly where most single family homes were being rented throughout the city. I would say most single family homes, they might be on Zillow or other platforms and on the internet, but many might be rented either through a brief Craigslist ad or through word of mouth. So getting a grasp on where rental units are located within single family homes was not a metric that we would in the past would have been able to accurately share with you. The rental registration has helped provide that background. We've also seen parallel analysis in regards to how we might apply it. We're still in the launch phase here in the first year, but we are seeing avenues for parallel analysis with regards to vacant homes or vacation properties, and as well as we've actually discovered a couple short-term rentals that weren't registered through our short-term rental ordinance. So there has been benefits there. I know what staff also added in regards to informing public safety. It kind of goes hand in hand with land use decisions in regards to where rental units are and how certain potential public safety concerns might affect a homeowner compared to a rental household, and it could be useful to city councils just pointing that out. Looking ahead, staff is very focused on addressing ongoing compliance. We are, as Irma mentioned, actively in that process now. Our goal is to release all suspected, so anyone who hasn't registered would essentially receive a citation warning and ideally a citation if they continue to not respond. We've made it clear in many of our letters, especially the most recent ones, that if you are not renting your home, to please contact us so we can remove you from the list. At certain points in the registration process, we were receiving a very large uptick in folks reaching out to us and contacting us. We had to bring on a temp staff part-time for roughly 4 months just to keep up. There were times where myself, Irma, and our temp could not answer the phones quick enough to keep up with inquiries that we were getting. And this would mostly coincide with us releasing letters for folks to reach out to us. So just in regards to scale of how we were keeping up, we've had a couple people who, in all honesty, and you may have heard from them, so I'm just being proactive, that there were a handful of folks that potentially didn't get crossed off the list that we had to follow up with. Those are areas that we're working on improving, and we wouldn't expect to see those return in future years. The goal is to get folks registered, and the registration system is set up so that it will ping folks when it's time to register annually, and once we have their information, the peripheral units that might be rentals, that essential drain on staff resources would hopefully be a little bit more manageable. So I think the first year is very unique in regards to launching this type of program. And it's definitely been a learning experience in that front. We're evaluating the effectiveness of our enforcement, as mentioned, and refining the registration process. I think now that we're receiving this information and probably could have gone under potential value statements, but outreach to landlords and tenants, now that we have information on and verified where rental units are, that could be a parallel process in regards to education on current resources and or ordinances that council may be looking to evaluate. That being said, the focus of the report and the presentation this evening did not focus on the financial components of the program. We are still evaluating all of the financial aspects. We're happy to answer questions on some background there to provide insight if that's helpful, but just acknowledging it wasn't necessarily the focus of what we're presenting you with this evening, but I'm happy to answer questions in regards to all transparency with what staff's procedures and responsibilities have been with the program. So it wasn't intentional not to talk about it. We're happy to answer any questions. It just wasn't the focus of what we provided. With that, I will, I believe that's our last slide. I'll return it, and it looks like Matthew might have something
one
to add.
additional clarification that I think was touched on, but tonight's presentation was an update on the registry program. Obviously, rent stabilization is closely connected to it, but there are separate ordinances, they're separate programs, and we thought if we tried to cover both in one night, it would muddy the waters and make it really hard to talk about the two programs separately. So staff will return with an update on the rent stabilization ordinance as well in the future. So just making sure that's crystal clear, because it's been confusing for a lot of people, the difference.
Thank you, Matthew, for clarification on that.
Thank you, Irma, for the nice presentation.
Thank you.
You have a question, Paul?
Yes, and then are we going to hear then any public comments?
Just one comment.
And then are we going to talk a little bit more, or is it, we'll just see how it goes?
Yeah.
Okay, quick question, and I appreciate presenting this out to us and back to the community. There, I know one of the slides said landlords not like program, and that could simply be just because they don't like being told what to do, or there could be some inherent problems with this program. And I only say that because I hear several landlords that have come up to me thinking, this may not be the right fit for our community. And I'm still trying to understand that. Because at some point I wonder, when do we bring both back? And I don't know what period of time we have, to look at it and then decide, we need, I'm not saying you just totally remove it. Well, maybe you do remove it and have something more beneficial or more that fits what Half Moon Bay is. And then maybe not. Because again, I'm hearing different things. And I also appreciate, I know the staff report said strain on staff resources. I heard heavy lift, and I heard essential drain. So that to me tells me you guys are taking a lot of load. I mean, a lot came at you. This is brand new, true, but I'm sure it wasn't necessarily written in your job specs that this was going to happen, which you'd have to do. And I hope, you're not going to be, that does ease off. But also, I think it's expected that would happen, something like this in a small town where, we refer to small landlords just thinking they are renting at price, and all of a sudden somebody's trying to tell them they have to register, what to do. I also know there was, it wasn't in the report, but I had asked the information and you provided it. There's a consultant we have on board. It was, I believe you said it was $30,000, the initial, and then it's going to have a maintenance cost, $25,000 a year. So, I mean, is this something, is there value to this? I don't know if you can answer that question yet, but I'm just letting you know, I think at some point we need to evaluate that. And I don't know if it's ready to do that. And then, I know you're going to bring what everybody calls rent control, but rent stabilization, which these two are tied hand in hand. They're separate, not equal, but they are separate, and they work together. And I don't know, as a council, and that's something we talk, if this would come back, if we hear the stabilization or we decide something tonight, if we want to bring this back, I don't know what point to have them both looked at. Is this the right fit? Let the community chime in whether it's the right fit for Half Moon Bay or not. But again, thank you for the report, and it's good to hear. I mean, I'm hearing, again, a lot of, from several landlords, they're frustrated too. Just, they're not feeling they're able to do what they think is the right thing. And I'll tell you, the other thing that just came up recently, and I know this, maybe I should save it for the rent stabilization, but I think it was 3% this year, the raise. But
2.6.
Right, so the fires have really, the new fire maps and that the insurance companies are messing with are changing. There's dynamics out of our control that affect owners of properties. So, and I don't know, necessarily how to address that, but, and again, that's related to rent control. But I just know I'm trying to find the right fit here for Half Moon Bay. And it's a new program, so it's going to have a lot of confusion.
I'd be happy to provide, I think there's some context that might be helpful to some of the questions you're noodling on, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
so for rent stabilization, just to clarify, it's a lesser number of properties in town. But for rent stabilization to be in effect for a specific unit, it has to be 2 or more units on that property and built prior to 1995. Council had to fall in line with the Costa-Hawkins state law. And that being the point I'm looking to make for you is that you are seeing a $75 fee plus a $286 fee per unit for a rent stabilized property. And if you look at some of the rent stabilized properties that have many units, we were ringing folks up for their registration and rent stabilization that was several thousands of dollars. Granted, it's a lesser amount, but for those specific landlords, that is a hefty amount. And I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that in regards to what you're referring to. So, and we had many conversations throughout the summer. I would say the most pointed conversations we had where folks were like just thoroughly upset with the ordinance that was passed, was much of which was related to rent stabilization. I'm not saying folks didn't need to get up to speed on the rental registry, but I would say I can safely generally say that more of the really difficult conversations that Irma and I had with many property owners, and we welcome these conversations. I just wanted to be upfront with you about that too as well. And they were difficult conversations to have, and we understood it comes with the territory and the area of the space that we work in. That being said, many of those conversations were far more difficult and folks far more frustrated in regards to rent stabilization. And that's just, I would say, our collective opinion on what we experienced in regards to feedback we're receiving throughout the summer when we launched the program. And that continued through the remainder of 2024 of folks who either were potentially ignoring initial notices or were on vacation all summer and then got back in the fall and received an updated notice when we started sending warnings of possible citation. We did a very delicate job of noticing, having the free period, noticing, then launching and I know I'm being long-winded, so I apologize, but wanted to add the detail for you on process. And then provided warnings and so forth. So the folks who are remaining and are receiving citations, I didn't want to make it an argumentative presentation by any means, but I feel like I can honestly say we did robust outreach in regards to this program. Many letters, e-news, it was in our quarterly currents magazine that went out to city residents. So I know it was in articles and so forth as well. So we did our best to navigate where we were in the requirements that came along with it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Public speaker. Nancy Fontana, please. Thanks for hanging in there, Nancy.
Again, can you hear me? Yeah. As I said before, I get really nervous here, so bear with me. I can't stand this program. I think it sends the wrong message to a city that is so concerned about housing, people that are making our homes for people and renting it to people, and this is insulting to them. It tells citizens that they're bad people. You're greedy, you're really bad, you're bad. Yes, I'm sure there are a lot of bad landlords, but there are also a lot of bad tenants. This program demonizes anyone that provides a rental in Half Moon Bay. It sends a really bad message. It's not a good look. And it sets up a situation that the tenants can get away with just about anything they want. And it doesn't address that. I realize it's an attempt to stabilize rent, but there's two sides to this. It's a contract. There are two parties. Either side can be wrong. And this seems to assume that only one side is wrong. And that's not right. Also, I'm shocked that a city, 16,000 people needs a program like this. This seems like something that would be more appropriate for a much larger city that has old apartment buildings that investors swoop in and buy up cheap, and then they wait for the gentrification to happen in the neighborhood, and they can up the rents, and they're slumlords. Most of Half Moon Bay's landlords, I believe, are mom and pop. They're people that, a lot of them are people that have lived here a long time. It might be the first home they bought years ago. They were able to move up into something, but they could see how the housing was going and said, gee, maybe we could have a little something. It demonizes. I want to tell you one very quick story.
Great, you have 30
I'm
seconds.
sorry.
30 more seconds. Thank you.
Yeah, in May, after the meeting, I went to have a glass of wine with some ladies. There were 4 of us. One woman had 3 rentals in Half Moon Bay. She was so insulted. She sold 2 and she moved into 1. So out of 4 people at that one little meeting, you lost 3 rental units. And I remind you that Mr. Campo addressed the council. He never would have bought a rental in Half Moon Bay had he known this. I think you're creating a monster here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. We have 2 folks online. First person is Carlisle Young. Carlisle, oh, you're unmuted. Go ahead. Thanks.
Yes. Well, I have a few comments. One is the first speaker, I forgot her name, was referring to suspected rentals. It just sounds like they're under suspicion, and I didn't like the way they phrased that. And I maybe just, it just raised my hackles. Secondly, I do know some people that put all their properties that were rentals on the market after realizing they'd have to pay triple registration fees just to have rentals and provide places for people to rent. And their perception was that it was a money grab by the city. And honestly, having a rental policy is one thing, but I think it really drove some sellers to put their properties on the market and get out of the rental business in Half Moon Bay. Why bother? But I did kind of want to ask what you meant by public safety concerns. Does that mean too many occupants? When you drive by some houses, you'll see 5 cars parked out front, and there's probably 3 or more families living in there, maybe some in the garage. Are you going around doing inspections on these rentals to see if people have, hot plates in the garage that could burn the place down, or what are you doing about that? That's what I mean. But when you mentioned safety, public safety concerns. And the last thing I just wanted to say is the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act was passed in 1995, and it placed limits on the ability of local governments to enact rent control. Specifically, it exempts single-family homes, condominiums, and construction built post-1995. So basically, you're going after old houses, I guess, or not even single-family houses, but old apartment buildings. Unless you're trying to get all the landlords in Half Moon Bay completely to, forget about this law and try to go after condo owners and single-family homeowners. So I don't understand why you're bypassing the Costa-Hawkins Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlisle. Our next speaker is Matthew Borieski.
Thank you. So I'm a landlord. I don't have any units within the city of Half Moon Bay. I guess maybe thank goodness. And I just wanted to say it's a little disappointing that the rental registry didn't come up at the same time as rent control - rent stabilization, because they go hand in hand. There's not really a need to track rental units, have people jump through hoops, have staff jump through hoops, have people pay a lot of money for units that there's no intention, in fact, there's no legal way to put rent control on. But I think there is a silver lining in that. I submitted some materials earlier that include a pretty broad spectrum of citations from economists across the political spectrum that discuss that rent control is not a good thing. Everything from NPR Freakonomics to Milton Friedman all say that it's fairly broken. So I'm hopeful that there's some opportunity for staff to take those into consideration as they prepare the materials for the rent control one. And I'm hoping that any additional discussion of the registration program would get postponed until a discussion about both programs together. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Oops. That's the end of our speakers. So public comment is now officially closed. Thank you. Any other comments from council?
So I think with budget time coming up, it'll be a good time to put together information on, how these programs are staffed and what are we talking about in costs, to date as well as projected. Frankly, I'm on the side of revisiting the whole conversation about rent stabilization again. I voted no previously, and I'm still opposed to it. I think there's some good intentions on people here, but I think, having looked very closely at it, I don't think it's the right solution for our community. I can see how it might be for very large cities, but I don't think it's right for us. So I'd like to bring back that whole conversation. But in the meantime, it would be helpful to have a lot of, information that's helpful during budget deliberations. So.
If I may, just as a point of clarification, I feel like it's helpful for the public and would have been seen in previous staff reports. The funding for this program did come from City Council pulled funding from the Affordable Housing Fund. So all expenses, we pulled 150,000, or earmarked, I should say, earmarked 150,000 for rental registry, and then 150,000 for the rent stabilization program as well. And we're using portions of that funding. We have not exhausted that funding.
Yeah, and that's helpful to know the source, but it's still money going out the door, so we want to understand that. So.
Understood. Definitely not sidestepping previous comments. I just wanted to add for clarification on where the funding was coming
that's good.
from. I apologize for stepping in and maybe unnecessarily, but okay.
So I had a lot of people calling me prior to being on council and worried and kind of upset about it, that have rentals, and they're basically saying they're just going to sell their house now. They don't want to deal with this across the board. There's a lot of people that, saying this. And I inherited my parents' house in Belmont. It's not something I went and bought or anything like that. But all of a sudden you've got the floor you got to do. You got a tub that they broke that you have to pay for. So there's things that you don't know and you can't predict, but you can on the roof or something like that. So owning a place is not that easy. But when you have somewhat of a controlled environment, when somebody says, when you hire a real estate expert in the rental market in that area, which I did in Belmont, I'm just using Belmont, he came to me and said, this is your high and this is your low based on this. So he kind of knew based on Zillow or whatever forms he did. And he had a comparison of 3 different ones that were equal to mine. And so I kind of knew what the rents should be. It's higher in Belmont, I'll tell you that right now, so I could see that as being a big change, but I was able to see what it was worth. But for us to be doing that for, I guess, reasons, but that's more for stabilization and rent control, I don't think we're that big of a city to be doing that kind of things. And I agree, because I've talked to people when I go to these other subcommittee meetings, I ask these questions, do you guys do it? And they're like stepping back, no, we don't want to deal with that. So it's kind of, I'm on the fence on this, but the data that we're getting is good, but I don't know if I want to see it continuing on, and I would like to revisit this whole thing. The other thing is, and Paul brought it up too, and I read it, and the staff report's really good, because you guys paint this picture when you're reading it. And I asked some question to Irma today about that, and I said, is it diverting you? And because it's how I'm reading it here, and you said, yeah, it's we were focused on this 500 phone calls and all this. A lot of people weren't ready for this. We're a small city. This is a big city thing, and we have staff that could be doing other things. I think we need to definitely talk about it, but keep gathering the information, but let's reevaluate later.
Yeah, I hope when we do the evaluation, we'll talk about why we decided to have rent stabilization. And I don't care if we call it rent control, rent stabilization is just a euphemism for rent control, but and why we decided to have it. Who is it going to benefit? I know, we brought up the issues that, a lot of workforce folks can't afford to live here. So what do you do in between the time they can't afford to live here and we're trying to build housing, more and more housing, and how many years it takes, 3 to 5, 7 years to build low-income, very low-income housing, but even for folks who might be making a little more, how long that takes. So where's the balance? How do you determine what the right fit is? If on one hand we want to have people who work here have some housing, and what's the balance between a mom and pop landlord or someone who owns a number of apartment buildings? There's a lot of pieces to it, right? Someone maybe who's owned a building for a long time, the mortgage is paid off, versus someone, all the expenses if they just bought, 8-unit building and is now overwhelmed. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to it. And people have their personal stories. We want to also limit homelessness in the area. So there's a lot of factors. It's never a perfect solution. Never heard any rent control, even in large cities, go over big with landlords who want to, feel they just want to get market rate, They own it. And, that balance between tenants' rights, and what we really want in terms of some of the outcomes. So I think it'll be a good conversation when we hear more, and we'll see. I think I agree also with Paul. It's worth revisiting. We don't know. We're just getting a lot of data. So anyway.
Yeah, well then, I worked with somebody who became a good friend who lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Santa Monica for 30 years, and for 30 years paid $400 a month. When he was a CPA and a certified financial planner and had some, legal education and still only paying, so there's inequities too. So.
Yeah, I grew up in a beautiful rent-controlled apartment in New York City, and knew plenty of people who grew up that way. And we got rent increases all the time. And the building was really nicely maintained. So, we got to be careful with the anecdotal stories and figure out, what works here and what it really looks like. And I've been a landlord too, so I've seen it from both sides. And so, yeah.
One last thing, I know I don't want to, but are we able to see with this data the houses that are selling because of this? Because I keep hearing that, I'm going to sell.
It would just take further analysis, so.
Okay.
It would be an added layer.
So we've received the update. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think we could definitely move on to our last item for the evening. Oh, no, two more. A little wishful thinking there on my part. Okay. So our next item is item 3C, the award of construction contract for the Frenchman's Creek Park Improvements Project. I think we have a staff report on that.
Could I make a request to staff on this item?
Sure.
Quickly review the alternatives here, not take too long. Okay, thanks. No penalty for brevity.
Sorry.
Happy to be brief. Good evening, council and members of the public. Maz Bazargini here with Jonathan Wu, Public Works Department. We're here to present the Frenchman's Creek Park Improvements Project Phase 2. And tonight, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan for the first part, and then we'll jump into the alternatives.
Thank you, Maz. Yes, great. Good evening, everybody. So I'll try to kind of quickly, sum this up a little bit. But what our staff's recommendation is to transfer about $116,000 to the capital improvement project, also known as Frenchman's Creek Park Improvements Project, the second phase of that project itself, as well as award a construction contract with contingencies to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, that being Half Moon Bay Grading and Paving Incorporated, totaling approximately $404,000. We'll dive a little bit more into the reasonings of this request at a later slide. So a little bit of background of the project. In February of 2019, the City Council adopted the Parks Master Plan. In spring of 2021, improvements were installed, such as installing new play structures as well as a accessible rubberized surface, also known as Phase 1 of the project itself. In fiscal year 22-23, the city received approximately $186,000 in Prop 68 grant funding, and it was a per capita grant fund as well. Later, in September of 2022, the City Council authorized the design for Phase 2 of the project, as well as designated Frenchman's Creek Park Phase 2 as the recipient of those grant funding. In January of 2025, staff then advertised the project for public bids. So here's a general overview of the project location highlighted in the blue square or blue rectangle. My apologies. It is in the Frenchman's Creek subdivision along Rousseau Francais Avenue, so kind of the main corridor of that subdivision itself. While maintaining the existing infrastructure that we have there from the Phase 1 project itself, the play structure and the accessible rubberized surface. This project includes multiple improvements. I won't go into them. This is an attachment within the City Council, the packet itself. So my apologies about that, but the packet itself. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds. So if you like to dive into it a little bit more of those improvements, feel free to do so. In a little bit of a bid summary that we have within this project, on February 20th of 2025 at exactly 2 p.m., city staff received exactly 7 bids. Although all came in much higher than what the engineer estimate was, the lowest bidder, that being Half Moon Bay Grading and Paving, was about 23.1% above the engineer's estimate. This next slide shows the fiscal breakdown, kind of getting into the weeds of what our request is. And to this date, the first line item, that being design, environmental, and miscellaneous, is what we've already expended as part of this project. About $58,000 was expended, and summing the remaining portions, the construction contract, contingencies, construction design support, material testing, environmental services. That totals to be about $444,000 to complete the project itself, which is the reasoning for a little bit extra request for this project.
Thank you, Jonathan. As far as the alternatives, this was part of larger conversations around budgeting and the necessary funds required to complete this work. So staff looked at the options and alternatives here presented tonight at the staff report. So there just as far as what we looked at, there was a couple of different iterations that we took. The first alternative would be to modify the scope to align with the available Prop 68 grant funding of about $185,000. That would obviously be a pretty significant change as far as what was proposed in the design originally and bid on. So that would be one option. The second alternative would be to modify the scope to align with the available Prop 68 grant funding, again, the $185,000, and the previous allocations that we've already made to the project fund of about $142,000. So that would be another revision to the project scope itself, but at a reduced amount for construction. And then the third alternative would be to postpone this project currently and come back for, discuss with State Parks, who is the grantor of the Prop 68 funding, to see if it could be utilized towards other park projects that are already under construction or other projects in the future. Any one of these three alternatives would require tonight's action to be a rejection of all the bids because the scope would be so significantly changed that we would not be able to move forward with the contract. It would need to be rebid. And that would be subjective whether it would be a formal bid or an informal bid depending on the price point. Anything under $200,000, it would be more of an informal process. Over 200 would be a formal bidding process, which just adds a little bit more funding requirements to post the bids in the newspaper and follow the proper public contract code requirements. So again, any of the alternatives we can certainly consider, but as far as tonight, the action that would need to be taken would be rejection of all bids. So with that, we've got the recommendation of the staff recommendation, which would be to move forward with the original scope of the project. But again, happy to answer any questions and get into any discussion.
Given our financials, and given that significant improvements have been made to the park already, I would recommend alternative one and just utilizing the Prop 68 grant. Having worked with the state managing grants, I think trying to get the grant money reassigned would be just impossible. Not happening. So I think I would be in favor of alternative one.
Can you bring the options up again while we're talking? So just we can...
And I'll just point out with alternative one, we would actually be able to return some of, or reallocate some of the funds that were allocated to this. So it's kind of a flip in the other direction. Obviously, it would result in a reduction of amenities being improved at the park, but it would allow us to take both general funds and park funds and redistribute them either the general funds back to the general fund or towards other, again, projects that are higher priority or already in the works.
And I think we'd want to make sure that we at least took care of the ADA accessible components, of the project. Because I think making improvements without addressing the accessibility would be a mistake. Just probably not legal either, but.
So that was one of the questions I had this morning when we talked about it. And I didn't really, ADA accessible, I was like, this is a pocket park, and I have a kid in a wheelchair. I was like, I would never even drive over there to use it. But that's just me. But I'm thinking, as I was talking to the city manager, they were saying, well, that's, for legal requirements and all that stuff. So it kind of changed when I thought of it that way. Because a pocket park's a pocket park. I think it's a little, I don't think somebody from the outside is going to drive there, but it needs that. And the parking does, It's horrible. I went there 2 weeks ago to just look at the park, and it's goofy, and the big truck trying to turn around. It's pretty bad. 5 people came to me, or they didn't come to me. They were at the park gathering with their dogs and getting water or whatever they were doing. And I asked a question, is this the park, the only park? I mean, I honestly thought maybe there was one more in the back. You know, I wanted to make sure I'm at the right park. And they talked to me as if I was a tourist, like, oh, we have many more parks here. And I'm like, no, I'm evaluating this park. They said, oh, and then they figured it out. And they go, well, there's nothing wrong with this park. This park's a great little park. We just had this beautiful play structure put in. And then another person said, well, it's for the smaller kids. We want something for the older kids. But out of the 5 people, they're pretty happy with that park. And it's got a nice bench. And so when I got this, and I'm looking at our budget, and I'm looking at what we have, I'm agreeing that I think the alternative one, but I'd love to see the swing put in, and maybe for the ADA for the parking. You know, if we could do something creative like that, because then they would get their swing. Legally, we look good with that parking. That's just a suggestion or an idea. I don't know if we can do it because I can't crunch numbers. That's what you do.
I crunch numbers too, and I was looking at this real quick, the bid summary, you know, and I think alternate one, and trying to use just the grant money, and can you use that for the design? Can you back charge the design of it?
We'll have to take a closer look at that. I don't know if that would be allowed, but we can consider it.
Okay. And then I too think, I talked to some folks that do live out there, and they said the swing set would be something desirable out there to do something. And 2, isn't ADA in a park also the surface under the play equipment? Isn't that something else you look at? So I know looking at the parking, you start getting into asphalt, concrete. That's where and I was looking at the bid summary, that's where your costs are. And I don't know if it works now, you know, I don't know. You have to make that judgment. But I know also, the play equipment needs the accessible access too. So, and I thought there were some of the items that were in here, wasn't that the synthetic surface related to that?
Correct. The surface is ADA compliant. You also had a ADA accessible riding structure that was part of the component. There's multiple ways to achieve the ADA requirements for a project, and as long as you're spending some funding towards those ADA compliant measures, it doesn't say which one specifically has to be done. So we can certainly take a look, and you're right, Councilmember Nagangas, that when you're getting into the pavement improvements, that is a pretty significant cost because of the nature of that work.
Right.
But we'll certainly evaluate all of it and see what makes the most sense. Obviously ensuring that we're meeting all codes and requirements, including ADA compliance, regardless of how we move forward.
You just stay within that 185,000.
And I'm sorry, if I could confirm your original question about using the funding for the design, you're saying, could we apply grant funding towards the 58,000 that we've already spent and really get back all of our local funds?
I was looking at the local money just because of the cost. I mean, I guess you got to measure what can be still done out there that makes sense to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
But I just want to make sure I was understanding the original question. Is that what you were asking?
If it's a possibility, I'm looking any way to get back some of our
and certainly
local money.
we're going to, if the answer is not to follow the recommendation with the resolution, we're going to need to come back with some analysis anyways. So.
But would you come back to us, though, to what you're going to do?
I think so. Before we go out to bid, we want to make sure we're bidding out something that is meaningful to you.
So as long as you do, okay, so this was a result of a master plan and it was talking with the community out there, or just a master plan?
The park's master plan identified that Frenchman's Creek Park needed some love. I mean, it didn't, on some parks, it really laid out, there's an opportunity to do something very different here. For Frenchman's Creek Park, it was clear that it just needed some updating and some love and improvement. And then we did, with an architect, before we even started phase 1, we went out there and did some community meetings and charrettes and, looked at options and kind of came up with this plan. Phase one was funding we had available. We moved forward with it. We've got this other grant, move forward with phase two. And certainly I think the other piece to point out is whatever option we choose tonight, it doesn't preclude us from coming back down the road and finishing some of these other projects as well.
And whatever we pick is something that it's in the master plan.
Yeah, it's already part of the design. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, if we could also see the breakdown of all the Half Moon Bay grading, all the pieces of that project. Because something like this, it would be nice, just finish one project at a time within that, fully. So no weird contingencies coming in that are too expensive to do the whole project. But if we could just kind of do piece by piece, well, that would be great.
Yeah.
And then we'll start getting in that process, maybe get some more feedback. Swings. Can we build swings there safely? I mean, there's always, swings.
I will share doing it kind of, I don't want to say piecemeal, but kind of one phase at a time.
Yeah.
The total cost is going to be more than if you paid somebody to come in and do all the work at once. There's what you call mobilization costs. And so doing this one phase at a time will make this more expensive, but we're weighing that against our current financial situation and funding available, right?
Yeah, I just feel, we've been a bit haunted by extra costs, maybe, or, it's just one of those things. So I don't want to see us keep going into that, just so we really know what the boundaries are, what we could spend, and feel confident with the contractor. Can you do this for, this amount? And not hit us with odd things that they haven't figured out at the starting gate. It's a nice park, and we just like to see it maintain its nice character and keep it simple but done well.
And if there are things that the neighborhood would like to do, would like to pay for, we should, serve as a fiscal agent or something for them to, pay for it. So, but they would need to pay for it.
The piecemealing can be a major problem, because if Maz is going to try to do a fountain and a dog fountain, and if you look at your spreadsheet on here, it's pretty pricey just for the irrigation and running the water. And then we're putting a swing set and we're putting the asphalt down but not laying the pipe down. But if you lay the pipe down in anticipation at some point we're going to make connection A to connection B, I'd like to see that kind of thinking. Okay? That makes sense to me. We can do this later on, or we just so what's the biggest thing what we did? We're already digging. We put some pipes down, we cap them, make sure we know where they're at. And if we don't want them, we don't want them. If we do, they're there. And then that way it's not wasting time and money. Now, the other thing would be to make sure, do we really need all this stuff like this barbecue? And then it says here for entry sign planting, $20,000. And then it goes across the board to $3,000, $7,000. It's hard to read this. But I don't know where that entry planting is. Are they saying it's in here, or entry sign planting is as you're driving into Frenchman's Creek? So there's a lot of money being spent all over the place here, and it adds up.
I'll confirm everything in there is related specific to the park. Right. There's nothing outside of the park area.
I'm just thinking, if we're going to piecemeal it, let's piecemeal it smart and just think outside the box. And actually see, do these people really want that fountain? Do they really need it? I know the people I ran into all had dogs, and they were getting the little poop bags out of the little container that was sitting next to the bench. So maybe they do want the water, but that's pricey for this water if they really want that water.
And you want to, deliver services, right? You don't want to have too much underground or what have you. You want to be able to give people something for the money. It's a grant. And the state, if they're paying for it, they want to see deliverables, right? So you got to balance this long-term thinking with, getting the most out of your grant funding.
Okay. So What's our recommendation here? Option, are we going with an option or?
Motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
I move that we reject all bids and pursue alternative one, which is to use state grant funding for various project components.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Nagenkast.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Reddick,
Yes.
Mayor Brownstone.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Now I think we're up to our last item. Item 3D, telecommute and alternative work schedule policy updates. Receive an update on the city's telecommute and alternative work schedule policies.
Good evening, Council. I am Lisa Rossi. I'm the Administrative Services Director, and tonight I'm here to give you an update on the city's remote work and alternative work schedule policy. To begin, we handed you a very thorough staff report with a lot of information, so I'm going to very briefly just go through some key points. I was going to say for the audience, but just so that we can just kind of get a very full picture of this. So in 2018-19, as part of negotiations, an alternative work schedule was introduced to the city and signed and approved by a resolution with the council. COVID came in 2020 and impacted the city greatly. Not only did it start with temporary telecommuting as a result of the shelter in place, but also due to very bad budget constraints and a definite hit to our economy, we decided to do closures of City Hall on Fridays, which has continued to this day. In 2021, we decided to formalize our telecommute policy, and we developed a policy and a protocol for everybody to follow. There is signed agreements that staff have to enter into, and as we shared in the staff report, there's certain aspects of each policy, the alternative work schedule, and the telecommute that must be in place for people to be accepted into the program. I call it a program, into the process. And then last but not least, I'd like to just remind everybody about the annex closure. I wanted to call this something a little bit more exciting, but Matthew insisted on City Hall consolidation. So that happened last year. And as you all know, we are all now at City Hall and really actually enjoying it. It's been a great experience. My team from the Annex loves being over in City Hall and is much more engaged and working and loves working with everybody so much more closely. So just to go over some finer points of the remote work and alternative work schedules. In remote work, as you all know, it's in all the constant labor magazines and labor groups. There are many employees and advocacy groups that advocate for flexible work schedules. In San Mateo County, most cities, I would say approximately, as in the staff report, over 75% of the cities do offer a telecommute or alternative work schedule. I'm in a Human Resources Association of San Mateo County, so we talk about it a lot. And then currently here in the city, 40% of our employees are participating in the telecommute agreements. Alternative work schedule, we have 70% of Half Moon Bay City employees participating. This is a good opportunity for us to give the positions, the classifications that can't necessarily remote work. This is an opportunity for us to give them a perk, and an alternative work schedule often works well with some of the other classifications that can't remote work. And of course, the work schedules are 410s or 980s, and a 980 is every other day off on following week. So some people choose Mondays, some people choose Fridays. So this is the current Half Moon Bay staffing schedule. As you'll see, we have 45 full-time employees, but only 40 positions are filled. As you can see, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we do have people on site. And when we say on site, what that refers to is that people are here at their designated place of work, which could be City Hall, Ted Adcock, or the Corporation Yard. However, I just want to make sure that I'm clear that although they are here in the city, it doesn't necessarily mean they're at their desk for the entire shift, as they have meetings, they have responsibilities out in the community. They may be doing things that take them away from the office, but they're still considered on site because they're working here closely with the community. And finally, I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the cities that do have remote work. I obviously won't read the list for you, as you can see it up on the screen, but I do want to clarify that the cities with asterisks next to them also have alternative work schedules. The standard for most of these cities is 2 days remote, 3 days in, or 50% of the time if they're actually doing an alternative work schedule as well. So, and that is my very brief presentation. I figured you'd want time to ask questions, and there might be other information that you'd want to know.
Council members.
So currently, right now, we're closed on Fridays, correct? I have a lot of people asking, we should be open on Fridays, I'll be honest with you, and I understand the dynamics of people, working from home, and also how many you have, and thank you for those slides. I took a picture of it. How many are here and how many aren't? But I think it'd be good, just from what I'm hearing, but it's only a handful. But they're always saying it'd be nice if City Hall was open on Friday, if we could adjust the scheduling where on the 980s you were talking, Lisa, if I'm not mistaken, then somebody's off on a Friday, or they would choose a Monday, but then have a staffing where you have just enough. I think it was 19 on Friday, if I remember right. 8 to 19. No.
8 to 19.
8 to 19.
Yeah, on the slide, I'll just clarify, Fridays are the day that most of the people that have alternative work schedules are off. But if you have a 980, that means, as Lisa pointed out, one Friday you're in, one Friday you're off. And so this kind of shows the range of how many staff we have on site, telecommuting, or off on Fridays. So there's ranges here, and it just depends on the particular Friday.
And then one of my concerns would be for someone, been used to something for so long, or you have that other person that's like, oh, I go in, it's not a big deal, I have to, that's what I have to do. And then you start changing the dynamics of it, then you lose somebody that's really valuable, and then we have to go looking for somebody new. And I don't know what the pool is like out there for people in this industry. I have no clue. So is that something you could just flip a switch and turn, and somebody's going to come knocking at your door? I don't know. And I also want to make sure that we keep people that enjoy working here, that love Half Moon Bay, and that are an asset here. So I don't want to make some changes, but you see what the core is. I think we need to be back, and you're seeing the trend. And I talked to Jim Reams, he's my planning commissioner, and he works in the city of San Francisco, and they're asking to come back. So it's a trend that we're seeing, but I don't want to create any waves. I'm fielding things that my constituents are saying, what I'm reading on the newspapers, when I'm seeing other things. So that's where I'm coming from. I'm not saying change. This is what I'm hearing.
Thank you. I was always taught customer service is our number one priority. And in order to achieve that, you have to be able to respond to your customers. The public sector, we're an interesting group. We're the only game in town. You can't go to somebody else in your city to get a permit, to ask a specific question about a code. So we have a very captured audience that has to come here. And in a small town, I too have heard about the Friday closures, and I would want us to rethink that, because I had asked, I guess originally it closed from the pandemic, correct, in 2020?
Yes, it was a result of the severe budget cuts. We also, during that time, did furloughs, laid people off, and closing on Fridays was another way we tried to cut some
Right.
funding.
Yeah, but I would like us to try and, this is me, is to have our, especially it's 8:30 to 5, and that's always an interesting hours for a small town to have, but if we could be open, I looked 5 days. And then I also looked at the different times, the work schedules. I'm trying to figure out, how do you manage the different, somebody's on a 410, somebody's on a 980, somebody's on a 5/8, or then I even saw flex hours. So it's almost like 4 types of work schedules. And it must be difficult. I mean, it'd be hard, and what you're trying to do is have coverage to ensure planning is answering planning questions, public works answering public works. So, because what we don't want ourselves into, somebody can't answer a question, so somebody's not there, they'll have to get back to them. And granted, sometimes the question is very complicated, you have to get back. But I always remember it was kind of a neat thing working in a small town where I would go to the front counter as a director or the assistant city manager and answer a question from the public. So I always, I was here, and granted, we didn't have some of the things that occurred since I've left the city. But I think it's important to have us here as much as we can, and I would like to see us ease off the telecommuting and have a work schedule that we all know what it is and we're capable of managing it. As a manager, I can tell you, 980s were tough. Now, I can tell you, it's like maintenance. I've dealt a lot with public works. Is so-and-so here this week, not that week? And you have a small staff, so it's important, if you're trying to plan things, you have enough people, to do the work. But just my thoughts.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of griping about City Hall being closed on Friday as well. So I think I'd like to personally see us be open on Friday and have people available to, answer people's questions. I agree with Paul. It looks to me like there are just too many different kinds of work schedules. How do you keep track of who's in and who's out? And especially if, management's out in Redwood City at meetings or whatever, it's like, it just seems like a bit much. I can understand having some flexibility, but I think the current menu of options is too overly generous. And I want to allow for flexible schedules, but I think we need to zero in on, maybe 2 instead of 4 or whatever it is. We're public facing, and people need to be held accountable as a public agency. And I think to have too many work schedules leaves too many opportunities for lack of coverage. Just my opinion. I know it's the city manager's job to, set the standard for operating hours and things like that. And I don't want to interfere with your authorities, but I'm concerned about those sorts of things. So, yeah.
I also took a picture, the same picture Patrick did, of all the breakdowns. How many cities are in San Mateo County?
20 cities.
20? Okay. So 16 of those cities have remote work. And 12 out of those 16 also have alternative work schedules. So I'm really curious how they make those work. I mean, we could get more detail. Do a lot of those cities aren't open on Friday? I mean, I don't know. And what kind of feedback do they get? How many people actually come into City Hall each day on average? Because this isn't just private sector versus public sector. And if we're talking trends, you mentioned trends, people coming back, but here in San Mateo County, we have 16 cities that do allow remote work and people having alternative work schedules. So I don't know what the trend is in San Francisco, and that includes private sector also. So, separating those out, I don't know if that matters even. But there's a heck of a lot of people not getting called back to work in the city also, because, if they're in tech, they don't want that. So they want to be able, they feel they can work very effective, or they come in core number of days, 2 or 3 days a week. So I think we really need more information before we know which trend is happening that would apply, to our counties and our cities in our county and our cities. Because some of the cities listed in there are some pretty large cities, a lot of people. This would be interesting to get more data.
Mayor Brownstone, just to give you an idea, it's kind of all over the map with these cities. The general times are usually 8 to 5, but a lot of them close during lunch. They close from 12 to 1. San Carlos is an anomaly. They're closed Wednesdays and Fridays to allow for remote work for their employees. But generally, most of them are open 8 to 5. Some of them, we did a survey. As I said, our HR directors group is fairly close. So I do have that information, so however you'd like me to present it to you, just let me know. But it is pretty consistent with the 8 to 5, a couple 9 to 5s, but an hour. And then they have counter hours that may be a little different than the actual city hall hours, because their city halls are a little bigger than ours. So yes, please just let me know how you'd like that information. I have it. And again, most of them are 8 or 9 to 5 o'clock in the evening. But it was interesting to me how many closed for lunch. So.
To that, I would say I would rather have 8 to 5 and close for lunch and give people a full hour instead of 8:30 to 5, where, people have half an hour for lunch and that it's really going to end up being an hour. Or, it's going to be half an hour there and then the break, and then I've got an accumulation of breaks, so I'm going to take a whole lot of breaks right now, and I'm going to stay away for another. It's too loosey-goosey. I'd rather close for lunch for an hour and make sure people are back in the office.
The only thing I understood, and I may be wrong, but I thought we stayed open during lunch because at times we'd get people coming in during their lunch hour. And so the thought was not to close between 12 and 1 because at times we have people coming in to run in to do their planning business or to talk to Public Works on their lunch hour. That's the only reason I thought we stayed open. And there's coverage at the front desk. When the admin assistant goes on lunch, somebody covers the front desk to ensure that.
Well, I would say 2 things. One, whether or not people take a little extra time for lunch or not, I'm more concerned if people are getting their work done and if they're responsive to, citizens' questions and things they want taken care of. And, good managers make sure that the work is getting done. That's really what I care about most. The other thing I really care about is, especially these days, because I read a lot of human resource studies now where I work, and there is a huge amount of stress going on for folks. I don't think I have to explain why to anybody what's contributing to that stress. So this idea of, employee well-being and mental health, it's something to think about as, the flexibility that employees have, or, where they can work from home a day a week, that can be huge. And I don't want to discount that, especially now and, the times of high stress that we have, and balance that against, making sure we have enough people on board. And, things are different from 30 years ago. You didn't have internet and ability to answer people's questions and process paper. You know what I mean? Things are different. It's one thing, there's things to have a good personal touch with, but people are also used to doing a lot of things online. So I'm just saying, the workplace changes, like people's expectations, but mostly I want to see a healthy workforce where we retain good folks, and I think we can figure it out. So, but have that balance.
Right. It is a balance. Customer service is still number one. I don't want us to forget, but we want employees to thrive here. I agree totally. And, some things, it's just, every other city is going to do what's best for them. And we just need to remember, okay, that's what they're doing, but what's best for Half Moon Bay? And I want us always to keep, whether it's the residents, the community, our customers, and staff. Staff is what we want staff to succeed, and I want staff to know that. And I want to make sure our mission is well, everybody knows our mission, that we're all in this together. But it's just, I'm just having a hard time, and this is why we're, looking at this, is the consistency to be able to manage the various schedules there are, and, the things we've already talked about. I don't want to belabor it.
So I think one of the first things to do is define what good customer service looks like, because different people can have different sense, right? And, how quickly we respond to, a customer's inquiry, how quickly if there's something they need to get approved or filed, how long that takes. What exactly does good customer service look like? And I think each time there's a customer service transaction, one way to measure that is you immediately send out a survey, and we get that all the time, right? You get a survey. Hey, how was our service today? You call in, ask a question. And that's something that, we can do also. How did you feel about the service? The person you talked to, the person who you dealt with. So that would help. For prioritize, I agree, customer service is most important, but let's make sure we all have a shared understanding.
I want to make a plea for structure. I don't know about you, but I find too much flexibility really stressful. I'm the kind of person who thrives with structure. And for me, with the state, it was 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. It was reliable. And pretty much everybody had the same thing. Management knew where you were. They knew when you were having meetings. We didn't have everybody on a lot of different schedules, so it was hard to figure out who's in, who's out, when are they coming back. I think what we want is less flexibility and more structure. I think it benefits the organization. You have procedures, you have known processes. That's how you reduce stress. Structure.
Well, maybe we're talking about the same thing.
Organization.
I think predictable access.
Predictability. Certainty. That's what a successful organization has.
Mr. Mayor, if I could provide some responses to some of the questions I've heard. We tried to anticipate what we could based on what we've heard from council members in the past in the staff report and in the presentation tonight, but we're hearing some other things. So a couple things I'll share. When it comes to the different schedule options, I heard some consternation about that. And one is the flexible work times, which may sound a little bit unstructured, really are based on service response. So the two instances that we have kind of different working hours are here at the community center, which allows us to be open the very extended hours that we try to offer here, meaning we have staff coming in at 7 a.m. to prep for the first classes of the day and different events, rentals, whatever. And we often, as you know, have staff here till the end of these meetings. So that's one of the instances. And we wouldn't want to change that. That actually allows us to provide better customer service, and especially given our very, very small staff sizes here and across the city. The other location, or the other group, is within our maintenance team. They start very early in the morning, and part of that is, part of their responsibilities are to kind of get the city ready for the day, right? And so we don't want to change that either. We want to make sure that we're sticking to best practices that serve the community best. I've heard a lot of questions about how do you manage all this. I think that's one of the advantages of being a smaller organization is each supervisor or manager has a pretty small purview, and it's not hard for us to keep track of these schedules. They are consistent, and we know what to expect. Also point out that most staff that have telecommute agreements are what we call exempt, which means they're salaried, they are exempt from overtime, and though a person might work a 410 and be off on Fridays, in most cases that individual is working on Fridays to some degree, or Saturdays or Sundays, because that's what the community demands. That's part of our job, has been shared, is to be responsive to the needs of the community. Many of those staff also are here, sitting in the audience at 11 o'clock at night. So part of this is the give and take of the roles, and that's no different than, when Paul was here in the past, and probably the work you did at the state, and, people in the private sector do this. But I think it all plays into what we've kind of built here. It doesn't mean that we're not open to change, and some of the feedback, the primary piece of feedback I've heard is being open on Fridays, and if that's something that the council feels like is important for the community, we can make that happen. I will share anecdotally, we average about 5 walk-ins a day from the community. Especially coming out of the pandemic, the number of people coming into City Hall has decreased significantly. Part of that probably is that we've implemented things to allow people to transact with us more online. We have a great phone system now that, for better or for worse, you call my desk, it's ringing my cell phone. I'm accessible 24/7. Many of our staff are in that position. So technology has put us in a better space to be responsive regardless of the schedules and when we're open or closed. But as far as that 5-day-a-week City Hall being open, that can be done, and I don't think it takes it'll take a little time to readjust people's schedules to make sure we've got coverage on that day.
What I think a lot of it is, people walk by City Hall and they say, I look in the windows and nobody's ever there. Maybe put inflatable dolls in the seats.
those dummies for the carpool
no
lane.
Inflatable dolls.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, they'll be they're made of post-consumer recycled content.
Right.
No, and I've heard that as well. People, say, it's a ghost town, and that's part of the reason we showed that chart that shows Monday through Thursday. I think Mondays, about 70% or almost 80% of staff are on site. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, closer to 90% of staff are on site. And then Fridays, of course, with it being closed, is the lowest numbers. But on site doesn't mean you're sitting at your desk waiting for a person to come in, right? If you look at my calendar, good luck walking in. Ask my wife, good luck. Just shoving your way into my schedule. It's tough. And that's, I think, the downside of a small staff is
right.
Everybody is very busy all the time, and it depends on the role. We do have staff that spend most of their day at a desk and are available based on their role for that direct customer service, and they're there. Mm-hmm. But just because people don't see somebody sitting at a desk, or you look in and there's only a few people there, well, they can't see into a conference room. They can't see down at the train depot. And that's the hard part. But perception is reality, and somehow it seems like there's a perception that because of the flexibility we've created, that there's not enough people around, and we've got to find a way, whether we make changes or not, to improve that perception.
And, I think this just bears, more thinking, more creative thinking. I'm not saying tell everybody to be in the office 9 hours a day or anything, but address, the issue of customer service, like Paul said, and some flexibility, maybe not too much, but.
Right, I want, when you mention exempt employees, those are typical your managers, supervisors that are exempt, aren't there a lot of those? Because
that is a big piece of it. It's also management analysts, it's our engineers, our planners.
So make sure there's
a broader group.
People here that can make decisions, because I've heard also, well, I can't because so-and-so's not here. Or somebody says, well, no, we have to get back to you. If we could, that should be the exception, not the norm. Hey, no, that's I'll get so-and-so, they can come right here and answer that right now. So I just have that coverage. That's why I worry about telecommuting, because if you give me a choice, well, of course, I'm going to take Friday and Mondays off. I only have to show up 2 days a week. I'm just going to show up Tuesdays, Wednesdays. Whatever, what's happening. And I like to make sure, because it's a small town, that's what's unique about Half Moon Bay. We're a small town. That somebody can come in and get an answer if they need it. Or somebody, and if you do have to get back somebody, it's as quick as possible, But that's just more input.
But I'm also hearing that when someone's not around, you can get in touch with them really easily. Their work phones are connected to their own phones. That's what most people do. They transfer their work number. And, there's another thing about customer satisfaction, a truism. When someone has a negative experience, they repeat it like 20 times, When it's a positive experience, it's less so. So when we say, oh, I hear people say, someone's not around, I'm just always a little bit, questioning. People walking by and saying, oh, there's nobody in here. But there are. We just saw those numbers. So all I'm saying is, when you hear something negative, we all need to take it a little bit with a grain of salt and ask some follow-up, because sometimes, just blurting stuff out because they're, having a bad day. So, something to think about. Okay, a few more items then. Are we done?
Well,
do we need more guidance here? Or
I think we've presented information. There's been a
Yeah.
discussion. I don't feel like I have clear direction on what's next, other than continue to collect data.
Lisa said she would, compile.
Yeah. The other thing I wonder, we have an HR subcommittee, and I wonder if there isn't an opportunity to meet with them and kind of work with them on, okay, how do we address some of these concerns?
Helping people understand.
Yeah.
Who is on the HR subcommittee?
I think it's the mayor and Deborah.
Me and Councilmember Penrose.
In the meantime, lights on at the City Hall and the blinds open on Fridays.
We're going to have to get rid of the reflective window coverings on most of our, poor Moz has to watch people pick their teeth and straighten their hair, and it's an interesting experience sitting in Ma's office, I will tell you that. So okay, it sounds like there's more discussion to be had. We can provide some additional details to help inform you, and maybe we'll schedule at least one meeting with the HR subcommittee to just get some feedback from them and talk about things that could be changed and how to best implement them.
It's just good for council to know what the deal is.
Yeah.
The other thing is also to make sure that I'm not trying to make a change. If you have good staff and you come back and you say, hey, we can tweak this a little bit, I'm not saying to change, I'm just saying to try to have a plan without losing somebody that's important to me.
Yeah.
And hopefully whoever's covering this story for the media, we've given a lot of information. and we can share more information. So to help people measure their own assumptions, and data is always helpful. So okay, any commission committee reports?
We've had a planning commission and a rec commission recently. We can share updates on them tonight, or we can do them in 2 weeks. It's really up to you how you're feeling right now. They'd be short reports.
How you feeling, Councilor?
I'm here.
All right.
Let's hear it.
Leslie, I see Leslie coming. She can give a quick report on planning commission meeting that we had last week.
I attended the planning commission meeting. That was pretty interesting.
Is this on? Okay. So last week at the Planning Commission meeting, we had a little CEQA education, and we reviewed the gate closure at Redondo Beach Road, which was pretty controversial. And the Planning Commission approved that. And then we also looked at the Measure D allocations, which was definitely the most interesting part of the meeting. And the planning commissioners, I have to say, were just really impressive, remarkable actually. They really dug in and discussed and came up with creative solutions to a problem that we had never encountered before, which was that we ended up with 22 allocations, except that the last one was for 2 allocations. It was for a single-family residence and an ADU, and the only way to offer them in the last allocation was to either split it or have the next one down take it. And the planning commissioners came up with a great solution, which was to really look equitably at how the allocations were spread across the applicants and remove some allocations from an applicant that wasn't going to be using them this year. That was Mid-Penn on 940 Main, and apply those elsewhere. And then the other part of their decision was to recommend to you, the council, that you accept some transfers later in September. So it was just great to be a part of, I have to say. Anyways, thank you.
And that was your first Measure D.
That was my first Measure D. Yeah, this whole experience is the first time that I've been
Welcome
through
to
it.
Half Moon Bay.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm not sure what kind of laughing that is, but I'm sure it comes with mixed feelings. I attended the Recreation Commission meeting last week as well, and I think there was a lot of great things, but the highlight was welcoming our new youth commissioner, and it was great to have him there and to get him sworn in and to expose him to kind of what we do. And I think the best part was that he jumped right in and provided some great feedback and brought that perspective they were looking for. So it was really, really exciting. We did receive a report. The last 2 meetings, they've received reports on the farm worker memorial concepts, and they provided some really great feedback that'll be incorporated into a presentation that will come to you a little later this year. And then finally, they talked about their priorities and what they want to kind of ensure gets to you all. And so they really honed in. They recognized the financial constraints the city's under and some of our staffing constraints. And they really got focused, and I'll be bringing some of that forward when we talk about priorities later this year. So very productive meeting, and so great to have a youth commissioner. Really cool. So thank you.
Thank you. Any future items for discussion? Nope.
There's still one more item.
Oh, city council reports?
Councilmember members' report.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Get it.
I thought you were getting ready to
I was, because
put the hammer down.
We used to have that in reverse, so I forgot.
But I just wanted to tell, and actually the four of us were there, the Farm Day luncheon, which, so, last time I was there was 20-something years ago. And and it's still a neat event. I think it's a great recognition on the coast. I think there's a lot of politicians there, and that's an interesting arrangement with the farmers and ranchers, and a lot of Half Moon Bayers, that some of them, whatever number that's been going on, they've been there, just as many times. So that was fun to go to again and see everybody there. Again, all of us were there too. I did have that meeting with the CTC, the Transportation Commission Chair, and what he's done, he's arranged to have Half Moon Bay, Pacifica, and this would be with our Public Works Director and City Manager be invited, myself, I guess another council member could have maybe two, but to meet Half Moon Bay, Pacifica, and County of San Mateo, since we're all on the coast, and meet with Caltrans and CTC staff to understand the relationships out there, the granting, the funds that are out there. There's some separate funding through CTC that city has by formula it gets, but it's competitive. So it's good to know, each other. There might be, how to get competitive. So I will, once I know a date, trying to arrange a meeting with 12 of us, that could be interesting, but hopefully it's sometime April, May, be able to provide that on. And one day I saw Moz here and he already left. I walked the dog today and I saw, on the coastal trail between Kelly and Poplar, there was that big, new area that the trail was pushed further east, and there's some drainage pipe that's put there. End of the drainage pipe popped off, so it's just eroding now. The erosion it fixed. So the area that was fixed is now being eroded because the end of the pipe had just that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that report. That's it. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.